Before we begin tonight's story, let me ask you a simple question. It might seem strange at first. Where are you right now? And what time is it? Are you watching this video while lying in bed? Your phone just inches from your face as your eyelids grow heavier? Are you relaxing on your couch with headphones in, trying to escape from the chaos of the day? Or are you somewhere unusual, perhaps, sitting alone in your car, parked under the dim yellow glow of a streetlight, the world outside silent except for this voice in your ear? Wherever you are, however you're listening, welcome. And before we dive into tonight's forgotten history, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel, as we do something a bit different here. We don't tell you boring facts from dusty textbooks. We tell the kinds of stories that keep you listening to the end stories that are strange, true, and sometimes so unbelievable that you'll wonder why you never heard them before. And tonight's story might be one of the weirdest of all. Let me set the scene. Imagine standing in the middle of an ancient market thousands of years ago. The air is heavy with the smell of baked bread and fresh herbs. Traders shout about olive oil, spices, and cloth. But in one corner of this chaotic scene, something odd is happening. A woman carefully hands over a few copper coins to a merchant. In return, she's given a small pouch filled with something strange. Not food, not spices, not medicine, as we know it today. Inside the pouch is clay. Clay is meant for eating. Yes, you heard that right. In the ancient world, people consumed dirt, clay, and mud, not because they were starving or confused, but because they believed it would heal them. From the deserts of Egypt to the temples of Greece, from the rainforests of South America to the mountains of ancient China, human beings throughout history have intentionally consumed the earth. But why? Were they simply superstitious? Were they desperate? Or did they know something that modern medicine has forgotten? Tonight, we're going to uncover one of the strangest medical traditions in human history, the deliberate consumption of earth, known as geophagy. That's right, it's a real word, from the Greek geo, meaning earth, and phagon, meaning to eat. And once you start pulling at the thread of this practice, the story only gets weirder. We're not just talking about one tribe in one isolated village. No, this was a global phenomenon. Ancient Romans bought special clay wafers after big feasts, believing they would purify the body. In India, Ayurvedic healers prescribed earth powders for stomach problems. In Africa, certain clays were known to stop nausea. In medieval Europe, even kings consumed dirt under the advice of their doctors. But why did so many ancient people, across so many different civilizations, all come to the same strange conclusion, that eating the earth could cure disease? That's the first mystery we'll explore tonight. And trust me, it's not as foolish as it sounds. Imagine living in a time before antibiotics, before hospitals, before anyone understood bacteria or viruses. Your stomach hurts. You're vomiting, shaking and sweating. The local healer looks at you with knowing eyes and hands you a small tablet of earth. You swallow it, and somehow you feel better. Was it magic? Or was it science we've forgotten? As you listen tonight, consider this. Even today, some medicines are still made from minerals found in clay. Modern scientists have discovered that certain clays contain compounds that absorb toxins, bind to harmful bacteria, and coat the stomach lining, soothing pain. Could it be that ancient people observed animals doing this, watching parrots or elephants eat clay after consuming toxic plants and decided to copy their behavior? Could their tradition of eating dirt have been early empirical medicine, based on careful observation, trial, and error? But of course, there's a darker side to the story too. In some cases, earth-eating led to disaster. People consumed contaminated soils filled with parasites or heavy metals like arsenic. In desperate times, like famines, slaves, and peasants, ate clay to feel full, even though it slowly poisoned them. The line between medicine and madness was thin, and that's what makes this story so fascinating. It's not just about clay. It's about the human need to survive, to heal, to try. Anything when nothing else works. It's about ancient wisdom and ancient mistakes. About rituals that seem bizarre to us now, but made perfect sense to people living in a terrifying, unpredictable world. Over the next 2 hours, we'll travel through time together. We'll meet Roman doctors who stamped sacred clay with the emperor's seal. We'll follow Chinese healers grinding mineral-rich earth into powders. We'll hear the whispered stories of African midwives burying clay beneath pregnant women's beds to protect them from evil spirits. And we'll visit medieval monks who secretly baked earth into their bread during plagues. But before we go further, let me ask you one more question to think about as you listen. What are the strange medical habits we practice today that future generations will laugh at? Maybe hundreds of years from now, people will look back at us and ask, why did they swallow so many pills? Why did they inject strange chemicals into their bodies? Why did they eat processed foods filled with substances no one could pronounce? Just like we're confused about dirt eating now, perhaps they'll be confused about us. That's part of what makes history so humbling. The things we believe are normal today might seem ridiculous tomorrow. And the practices of the past, as strange as they seem, were often based on real needs, real observations, and sometimes even real successes. So tonight, as you relax and listen, let yourself drift into this forgotten chapter of history. Picture the dusty marketplaces, the sacred ceremonies, the whispered prayers over bowls of earth. Think of the healers, the mothers, the travelers, all of them desperate to stay alive in a dangerous world. Think of the scientists today who still study the healing properties of clay, wondering if ancient people knew something we've lost. And get ready, because the story is only just beginning. In the next part, we'll travel to ancient Greece, where the most expensive medicine wasn't a potion or an herb. It was a special kind of clay wafer, sealed by a temple priestess and sold for more than its weight in silver. We'll learn about the rituals, the recipes, and the reasons why earth-eating became part of medical tradition. And along the way, we'll keep asking, is this weird? Or is it wisdom disguised as something strange? Stick with me, because the deeper we dig into this topic, literally the stranger and more fascinating it becomes. Imagine the sun rising over the Aegean Sea, the sky painted in soft hues of pink and gold as the first light touches the white marble columns of ancient Greece. On the island of Lemnos, the villagers gather at dawn for a ritual that happens only once a year. A priestess dressed in flowing linen steps forward, holding a small silver shovel in her hands. With solemn chants echoing through the misty air, she digs into the earth, carefully removing a specific type of clay believed to have mystical healing properties. This is no ordinary dirt. It's called terra sigillata, or sealed earth named, for the stamp pressed into each clay tablet by temple officials. The clay is then baked, cut into small wafers, and wrapped in cloth for transport across the ancient world. By the time it reaches the bustling markets of Athens, Corinth, and Alexandria, its price rivals that of gold. People don't just buy it, they treasure it, hoarding the wafers in carved wooden boxes or wearing them as amulets around their necks. But why did these ancient Greeks believe so deeply in the power of the earth? The answer lies in their medical philosophy. To them, health wasn't about killing germs or fighting viruses. They didn't even know those existed. Instead, health was about balancing the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you had too much bile, you became ill. If your phlegm overflowed, your body weakened. Doctors prescribed everything from leeches to herbal teas to correct these imbalances. And sometimes, They prescribed clay. Clay, they believed, could absorb excess bile and toxins from the body. It was like nature's sponge, soaking up poisons and calming the stomach. This wasn't just superstition, it was early chemistry, the observation of cause and effect. People noticed that after eating certain types of earth, their stomach pains eased. The clay coats their digestive tract, reducing inflammation and binding harmful substances. But there was more to it than just physical healing. For the ancient Greeks, health was tied to the gods. The earth itself was sacred, a gift from Gaia, the mother of all life. Consuming clay wasn't just a medical act, it was a spiritual one. It symbolized returning to the source, purifying the body by taking in the essence of the earth. This belief wasn't unique to Greece. Across the world, ancient cultures developed their versions of this practice. In India, Ayurvedic medicine prescribed bhasma, ashes, and earth powders believed to balance the body's energies. In China, clay was mixed with herbs to treat diarrhea and food poisoning. In Africa, pregnant women chewed special clays to ease nausea, a practice that continues in some regions even today. In South America, tribes in the Amazon created clay mixtures to neutralize toxins in wild plants, allowing them to eat otherwise poisonous foods. This wasn't random behavior, it was survival science. Humans noticed patterns. When animals got sick, they ate clay. Birds did it, monkeys did it, elephants did it. People copied them, learning from the natural world. And sometimes they got it right. Modern science has confirmed that certain clays contain kaolinite and manmorillonite, minerals that can bind toxins and calm the gut. Today, we still use these substances in medicines like kaopectate, a remedy for diarrhea. But back then, ancient healers didn't have microscopes or laboratories. They had observation, tradition, and ritual. And sometimes, those rituals worked better than we might expect. But there were dangers too. Not all earth is safe to eat. Some soils contain harmful bacteria, heavy metals, or parasites. In desperate times, people consumed whatever they could find, risking their health. Slaves and the poor often resorted to eating clay simply to fill their stomachs, not for healing, but to stave off hunger. In some cases, this led to geophagic cachexia, a condition where the body wastes away because it can't extract nutrients from the clay. Their bellies were full, but their bodies starved. Still, the belief in healing the earth persisted. Romang. Physicians like Galen, one of the most famous doctors of the ancient world, wrote extensively about the use of earth in medicine. He recommended Lemnian clay for wounds, stomach issues, and even as an antidote to poisons. Merchants sold it in tiny stamped tablets, each one a certified product of the sacred island. Some people ground the clay into powder and mixed it with wine. Others swallowed it whole after heavy meals, believing it would prevent food poisoning. The clay became so popular that counterfeits appeared on the market. Unscrupulous traders sold ordinary dirt pressed into molds, tricking the desperate and the sick. But true terra sigillata was a treasure, passed from healer to patient, sometimes for generations. Its use spread far beyond Greece. In medieval Europe, people still used it during the Black Plague, hoping it would absorb the mysterious miasma that carried death. Apothecaries stocked jars of earth alongside their herbs and tinctures. They believed the earth could draw out sickness, acting like a sponge for the soul as well as the body. And here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. In some places, the earth wasn't just medicine, it was protection against magic. People believed that eating special clays could ward off curses, break spells, and guard against the evil eye. The connection between earth and magic runs deep in human history. After all, the earth is where life comes from and where bodies return when life ends. To eat the earth was to participate in the cycle of life and death, health and decay. It was an act of both desperation and hope. Imagine for a moment what it must have felt like to live in those times. Your child is sick. There's no hospital, no doctor with modern tools. You have herbs, prayers, and clay. You mix a small piece of earth into water and help your child drink it, whispering a quiet plea to the gods. Maybe the fever breaks. Maybe. It doesn't. But in that moment, you've done what you could, using the knowledge passed down from your ancestors. And sometimes, remarkably, it worked. Even today, scientists are studying the antimicrobial properties of certain clays. Some types of earth naturally kill bacteria, prevent infection, and neutralize toxins. Modern labs are testing clay samples for use in wound dressings and even cancer treatments. Could it be that ancient people, through observation and necessity, stumbled upon real medical practices that we're only now beginning to understand? But of course, not all clay was healing. Sometimes it became an addiction. People developed cravings for earth, a condition known as Pica, which still affects people today. Pregnant women, in particular, often develop a desire to eat non-food substances. Some scientists believe this is the body's way of seeking minerals it lacks. Others see it as a psychological response to stress and deprivation. In ancient times, these cravings were interpreted as spiritual needs, signs of imbalance in the body or the soul. The act of eating dirt carried meanings far beyond the physical. It was about cleansing, connecting, and surviving. As we continue our journey through this forgotten history, ask yourself, how much of what we consider strange today will be seen as wise tomorrow? How many modern medicines started as folk remedies, dismissed by the elite, but preserved by tradition? In the next chapter, we'll explore how ancient Egypt used earth not just for healing the living, but for preserving the dead. The same clays that soothed stomachs also protected mummies for thousands of years. And we'll learn how earth became part of spiritual rituals, blending medicine with magic in ways that blur the lines between science and superstition. So stay with me, keep listening, and let your mind wander through the dusty temples and bustling markets of the past. The story of why ancient people ate dirt is only beginning to unfold. Now let's shift our attention from the marble streets of ancient Greece to the golden sands of ancient Egypt, where the relationship between humans and the earth reached an even deeper, almost mystical level. In Egypt, the soil wasn't just dirt, it was life itself. Every year, the Nile would flood, spilling rich black silt across the land, transforming the desert into fertile fields. The Egyptians called this sacred soil Kemet, meaning the black land, and they worshipped it as a divine gift. But they didn't just grow crops with it. They consumed the earth, believing it held powers that could heal the body and preserve the soul. Imagine the vast temple complexes of Thebes and Karnak, where priests and healers prepared special medicines in shadowy chambers filled with incense and the whisper of prayers. Among their remedies was a substance called bolus armena, a type of medicinal clay imported from Armenia, but sometimes gathered from the Nile's edges. This clay was mixed with honey, frankincense, or wine, and used to treat everything from digestive problems to fevers. Egyptian physicians, known as Swanu, were among the most advanced medical practitioners of the ancient world. Their papyrus scrolls, such as the Ebers Papyrus, describe hundreds of remedies, many of which involved earth. They believed that diseases could enter the body through bad air, spoiled food, or spiritual imbalance. Clay was a tool for restoring harmony, both physically and spiritually. But here's where the story becomes even stranger. The Egyptians didn't only eat clay to heal the living, they used it to protect the dead. When preparing mummies, embalmers coated the bodies in natron, a naturally occurring salt and mineral mixture that included sodium carbonate, bicarbonate, and sometimes clay-like substances. This process dried the body, preventing decay. In a sense, the same earth that healed the stomach was also used to preserve flesh for eternity. To the Egyptians, this wasn't contradictory. Life and death were part of the same cycle. By consuming the earth, they purified their bodies. By wrapping the dead in earth-derived substances, they protected the soul's journey to the afterlife. Imagine standing in a dimly lit embalming room, the air heavy with resin and myrrh. Priests chant over the body of a deceased noble. They press clay and natron into every fold of skin, believing it will stop the rot and keep the ka, the spirit, from wandering. Nearby, a family waits, holding clay amulets in their hands, swallowing small bits of earth mixed with date syrup to calm their grief and protect their health. This intimate connection between earth, medicine, and magic permeated every level of Egyptian society. Even the pharaohs carried clay-based remedies in their royal tombs. Archaeologists have discovered jars of medicinal earth sealed inside pyramids, meant to be used in the afterlife. For the Egyptians, sickness wasn't just a physical problem, it was a spiritual one. The body and soul were intertwined, and clay was one of the few substances that touched both realms. But the practice of eating earth wasn't limited to the Nile Valley. Across the Red Sea in ancient Mesopotamia, similar traditions flourished. In Sumer, Babylon, and Assyria, people visited temples to collect sacred earth, believed to hold the healing power of the gods. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the world's oldest legal documents, even mentions the use of earth in medical treatments. Mesopotamian healers mixed clay with herbs, animal fats, and oils to create poultices for wounds and medicines for the stomach. They believed that certain types of earth could draw out evil spirits, causing disease. Sometimes they applied it to the skin. Other times, they instructed patients to swallow it. Clay tablets from ancient Mesopotamia describe ceremonies where priests would chant spells while mixing earth with water, creating a ritual drink intended to cleanse the body of both physical and spiritual poisons. These practices reveal something profound about human history. Across cultures, people have always sought healing in the simplest, most accessible places, in the soil beneath their feet. They believed the earth held secrets, both medicinal and mystical, and they weren't entirely wrong. Modern science has shown that many of these clays contain smectite, bentonite, and kaolinite, minerals with real therapeutic properties. These substances can absorb bacteria, neutralize toxins, and even promote healing in wounds. But in ancient times, this knowledge wasn't written in textbooks. It was passed down through stories, rituals, and careful observation. Let's return now to Egypt for a moment. Picture a healer standing at the edge of the Nile, scooping clay from the riverbank. She mixes it with carob powder and honey, forming a paste she believes will soothe the child's stomachache. Nearby, fishermen cover their cuts with the same clay to prevent infection. In the markets of Memphis and Heliopolis, merchants sell small balls of earth wrapped in linen, offering them as cures for nausea, bleeding gums, and poison. These remedies were part of daily life, but they also carried symbolic weight. To eat the earth was to accept the protection of Geb, the earth god, and to connect with the cycles of life and death. It was an act of humility and trust, a way of acknowledging that all life comes from the soil and will one day return to it. This mindset wasn't unique to Egypt or Mesopotamia. In ancient China, the concept of di huang, or earth medicine, was central to traditional healing. Practitioners ground mineral-rich soils into powders and added them to herbal formulas. These earth medicines were believed to stabilize the body, anchor the spirit, and treat ailments like diarrhea, vomiting, and weakness. The ancient Chinese medical texts such as the Shenong Ben Kao Jing list dozens of soil-based treatments. Some were consumed directly. Others were burned in rituals or used to anoint the skin. In India, Ayurvedic healers used earth in similar ways. Clays like multani, meaty, fuller's earth, were not just cosmetic, they were medicinal. They were applied to the skin to draw out toxins and sometimes consumed in small amounts to balance the body's dashas, vata, pitta, and kapha. The earth was considered cooling and grounding, essential for restoring balance in times of illness. Across Africa, the practice of geophagy eating earth has continued into modern times. Pregnant women in various regions still consume specific clays to reduce nausea and supplement their mineral intake. These traditions are passed from mother to daughter, woven into the fabric of community life. And in South America, indigenous tribes mix clay with wild potatoes to neutralize harmful alkaloids, allowing them to safely eat foods that would otherwise be toxic. This practice is not only clever, but essential for survival in harsh environments. Imagine sitting by a fire deep in the Amazon, a grandmother teaching her grandchildren how to prepare clay paste to coat bitter roots before cooking. These aren't isolated superstitions, they're survival strategies developed over millennia. But of course, not every earth-eating practice was safe. In some cases, people consumed contaminated soils, leading to parasite infections, lead poisoning, or malnutrition. The line between medicine and harm was thin, and not everyone survived the experiment. Yet despite the risks, the tradition persisted, evolving across generations and continents. Why? Because sometimes it worked, and in a world without modern medicine, sometimes was often enough. As we continue this journey into the forgotten chapters of medical history, let's reflect on the resilience of human beings, their willingness to try, to learn from nature, to pass down knowledge, even when it seems strange to modern eyes. The story of why ancient people ate dirt isn't just about weird habits. It's about curiosity, observation, and the deep connection between humans and the earth. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these traditions survived into the medieval and early modern periods, influencing the medicines of Europe, Asia, and the Americas. We'll learn about secret recipes, bizarre rituals, and the surprising ways that the earth continued to shape human health long after the fall of ancient civilizations. So keep listening, let your imagination drift, and remember, sometimes the simplest things like a handful of earth hold the most unexpected secrets. As the ancient world faded into history and the medieval era dawned, the practice of eating earth did not disappear, simply evolved, changing form as new cultures rose and fell. Picture the cobblestone streets of a medieval European town, the air thick with the smoke of hearth fires and the sharp scent of herbs sold by apothecaries. Inside shadowy shops lined with wooden shelves, jars of powders and dried plants crowd the walls. But among them sits something unexpected. Small packets of earth wrapped in parchment, labeled with handwritten notes that read, Terra Sigillata, Armenian bolus, or simply holy clay. The Middle Ages were a time of fear and superstition, but also of experimentation. Without a true understanding of disease, people sought protection wherever they could find it, and the earth was one of the most trusted remedies. Physicians of the time, influenced by ancient Greek and Roman texts, prescribed clay for a variety of ailments. It was used to stop bleeding, calm fevers, and protect against poisons. During outbreaks of plague, people carried clay tablets stamped with religious symbols, believing the earth would absorb the deadly miasma that floated unseen through the air. Monasteries became centers of medical knowledge where monks copied ancient medical texts by candlelight and prepared remedies for the sick. Some of these remedies involved the earth. The monks of St. Benedict's order, for example, baked small clay lozenges mixed with herbs and wine, drying them in the sun and storing them for use in times of illness. Patients swallowed the clay to treat stomach problems, purify the blood, and ward off evil spirits. In this era, The lines between medicine, religion, and magic were blurred. Illness was seen not just as a physical condition, but as a spiritual trial, and the earth held symbolic power. To eat the earth was to humble oneself before God, to accept that humans were made from dust and would return to dust. This belief was rooted in Christian teachings, but also echoed older, pagan traditions that still lingered beneath the surface of medieval life. In times of plague, when entire villages were wiped out by unseen forces, people turned to clay as both medicine and talisman. They mixed it with vinegar, carried it in pouches, and applied it to their skin. Some even sprinkled clay in their homes to create protective barriers against disease. The clay became a shield, a physical and spiritual defense against the unknown. But it wasn't just the poor or uneducated who used these remedies. Royal courts across Europe stocked clay-based treatments in their private apothecaries. Kings and queens, terrified of poisoning, often consumed clay wafers after meals, believing they would absorb any hidden toxins slipped into their food. Poisoning was a real threat in medieval politics, and clay was seen as a simple, effective safeguard. The famous medicinal earth of Lemnos was still highly sought after, shipped across the Mediterranean in sealed containers. By the 14th century, the Venetian Republic controlled much of the trade in this sacred clay, ensuring that only the wealthiest could afford it. Meanwhile, ordinary people gathered their earth, often from churchyards or sacred hills, believing local soils held special powers. Some communities believed that earth taken from beneath gallows, where executions occurred, had unique properties. It was thought to be especially potent for healing wounds or protecting against curses, as if the soil had absorbed the final energies of the condemned. In other places, earth from pilgrimage sites or the graves of saints was ground into powder and consumed as a holy medicine. The idea that sacred ground could heal the body persisted throughout the medieval period, blending religious faith with ancient medical traditions. In the Islamic world, similar practices thrived. Scholars in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba translated Greek medical texts into Arabic, preserving and expanding upon the knowledge of Hippocrates and Galen. Physicians like Avicenna, known for his monumental medical text, the Canon of Medicine, described the use of clay in treatments for poisoning and digestive disorders. In Islamic culture, the earth from Mecca became especially revered. Pilgrims returning from the Hajj often brought back small amounts of earth from the holy sites, consuming it in tiny doses as a blessing and a cure. This practice was not officially part of Islamic doctrine, but it reflected the deep human desire to find healing in the most elemental substances. Across the Silk Road, traders carried clay from one end of the known world to the other, creating a global network of earth medicine. In Persia, clay tablets were sold in bustling bazaars alongside spices and silks. In India, Ayurvedic practitioners continued to use earth in their formulations, combining it with herbal pastes and oils. In China, the tradition of Duyao earth medicine remained part of the apothecary's toolkit, with mineral powders prescribed for everything from diarrhea to mental unrest. And in the Americas, indigenous peoples maintained their earth-eating traditions. Long before European contact, tribes in North and South America used clay to treat stomach ailments, reduce nausea during pregnancy, and detoxify food. In the Andes, people mixed clay with potatoes containing toxic alkaloids, rendering them safe to eat. This wasn't superstition. It was chemistry, passed down through generations of observation. Even in the harsh environments of the Arctic, some Inuit groups consumed clay to supplement their mineral intake when fresh plant food was scarce. The practice of eating earth was not just a medical emergency. It was a way of life, a survival strategy embedded in human culture across continents and centuries. But as Europe moved into the Renaissance and the scientific revolution began to reshape medicine, the practice of geophagy started to fade from mainstream acceptance. doctors began to focus more on anatomy, blood circulation, and the discovery of microbes. The new science of medicine pushed earth-eating to the margins, branding it as primitive or superstitious. Yet even as official medicine evolved, the tradition persisted quietly in rural areas. Folk healers, midwives, and local wise women continued to prescribe clay for stomach issues and pregnancy-related nausea. In the Appalachian Mountains of America, settlers of European and African descent carried these traditions with them, passing down recipes for clay consumption that survived into the modern era. Some communities in the southern United States still practice geophagy today, buying special clays from local markets or harvesting them themselves from known safe sites. These clays are often baked or processed to remove contaminants, continuing a practice that links them directly to ancient ancestors. Meanwhile, modern science began to catch up with ancient wisdom. In the 20th and 21st centuries, researchers discovered that certain clays possess antibacterial properties, capable of killing harmful microbes without damaging human cells. Studies in France and the United States have explored the use of clay in treating antibiotic-resistant infections. In Africa, clay-based treatments are still used to manage diarrhea and stomach ailments, particularly in areas where modern medicine is scarce or expensive. Pharmaceutical companies have even patented clay-based products for detoxification and gastrointestinal health, essentially rebranding an ancient practice for modern consumers. Yet the cultural stigma around eating dirt remains strong. Many people in the Western world view geophagy as strange, disgusting, or backward. They see it as a symptom of poverty or ignorance, ignoring the long history of earth medicine that stretches back thousands of years. But the truth is more complex. The human relationship with earth is deep, symbolic, and rooted in survival. We come from the earth, return to it, and in many cultures, nourish our bodies with it along the way. In the next chapter of this story, we'll explore the psychological and nutritional aspects of geophagy. Why do pregnant women across so many cultures crave clay? What minerals does the body seek when it turns to the earth? And how do modern scientists explain the ancient impulse to consume soil? We'll uncover the biological mysteries behind this. Practice and consider how modern diets may still be shaped by ancient cravings. So keep listening, relax, and let your mind wander through the dusty streets of medieval markets, the sacred hills of pilgrimage sites, and the quiet kitchens where generations of healers mixed clay into medicine. The journey is far from over, and the deeper we dig, the more we discover about the strange, fascinating, and sometimes miraculous history of eating earth. As we journey further into the strange world of ancient medical foods, it's time to explore a question that scientists are still trying to answer today. Why do so many pregnant women, across so many cultures and periods, crave clay? It's not a myth or a superstition. It's a documented phenomenon that stretches from ancient times into the modern world. From Africa to South America, from Asia to rural parts of the United States, expectant mothers have long reached for pieces of earth during pregnancy. But why? Is it tradition, desperation, or something deeper hidden in biology? Let's start by imagining a pregnant woman living thousands of years ago, perhaps in a small village near the Tigris River. Her body is changing rapidly. She feels waves of nausea, dizziness, and strange cravings she cannot explain. The village. Healer hands her a piece of smooth, cool clay. She bites into it, and the gritty texture coats her mouth, but soon after, her stomach settles. This is not a random act. It's a ritual passed down from mother to daughter, a shared wisdom that survives across generations. Modern scientists now believe this craving may be linked to pica, a condition where people consume non-food substances like ice, chalk, or dirt. But when it comes to clay, the story is more complicated. Some researchers suggest that the body, especially during pregnancy, instinctively seeks out minerals like iron, calcium, and zinc. Certain clays are rich in these nutrients, offering a natural supplement at a time when the mother's body is under intense strain. In ancient societies, where diets were often limited or seasonally restricted, clay could provide essential minerals, missing from everyday food. But the benefits may go beyond nutrition. Clay has unique properties that make it effective at detoxification. It can bind to harmful substances in the stomach, including toxins from plants, bacteria, and even parasites. Pregnant women may be more sensitive to these dangers, as their immune systems adjust to protect the developing fetus. By eating clay, they might be instinctively shielding themselves and their unborn child from foodborne illness. This idea isn't just speculation. It's supported by studies of animal behavior. Scientists have observed monkeys, parrots, and elephants consuming clay in the wild after eating toxic plants. The clay neutralizes the poisons, protecting the animals from harm. Ancient humans likely noticed this behavior and copied it, weaving it into cultural practices that survived for millennia. In Africa, women in Ghana and Nigeria still consume a special clay called kaolin, often baked into small, dry chunks. These are sold in local markets, sometimes flavored with salt or spices. The practice is so widespread that it has its market niche, with vendors specializing in specific types of clay preferred by pregnant customers. In parts of the southern United States, particularly among African American communities, similar traditions exist. Known as Georgia white dirt or down south clay, the practice of eating baked clay has persisted for centuries, tracing its roots back to African and indigenous heritage. These clays are carefully selected from specific locations, baked to remove contaminants, and consumed in small, deliberate amounts. But it's not just about pregnancy. Across many cultures, earth eating is tied to ritual, spirituality, and healing. For example, in Haiti, some communities prepare clay cakes called bonbon tea during times of famine or extreme poverty. These are made by mixing clay with salt and vegetable shortening, then drying them in the sun. While this practice has drawn criticism for its health risks, it also reveals a deeper cultural memory, one that connects survival, earth, and tradition. But let's return to the biology for a moment. Modern researchers are fascinated by the idea that the human body might have evolved mechanisms to seek out clay for protection. In 2011, a comprehensive study published in the journal Quarterly Review of Biology reviewed hundreds of cases of geophagy across cultures and periods. The researchers concluded that the most common reasons for eating clay were to protect against gastrointestinal distress and to absorb toxins, not to gain nutrients. In other words, people weren't necessarily eating earth because they were hungry for minerals, but because it made them feel better. This is especially true during pregnancy, when the body's sensitivity to toxins increases. Nausea and vomiting, often seen as symptoms of weakness, may be protective mechanisms designed to prevent the mother from consuming harmful substances. Eating clay could serve as a complementary defense, coating the stomach and neutralizing whatever slips past those early warning signs. Imagine for a moment the life of a pregnant woman in ancient Mesoamerica. She gathers white clay from a riverbank, dries it in the sun, and stores it in a small pouch. When the morning sickness comes, she chews a piece of the clay, trusting in the wisdom passed down from her ancestors. Her grandmother did the same, and so did generations before her. This act isn't just about the body, it's about continuity, survival, and trust in nature. But of course, not all clays are safe. Some contain harmful substances like arsenic, lead, or parasites. In certain cases, excessive clay consumption can lead to constipation, intestinal blockages, or mineral imbalances. The very properties that make clay useful, its ability to bind toxins, can also cause it to bind essential nutrients, preventing their absorption. Ancient people learned this through trial and error, developing specific preferences for certain types of earth while avoiding others. In some cultures, only certain family members or specialists knew where to harvest the right clay. The location mattered. The color, texture, and even the smell of the earth were clues to its safety and effectiveness. This knowledge was often kept secret, passed down through generations of healers, midwives, and elders. It became part of a broader system of traditional medicine that valued empirical observation as much as spiritual belief. Even today, modern geologists and anthropologists study the clays consumed by traditional societies, analyzing their chemical compositions to understand why specific clays are chosen. In many cases, the preferred clays are indeed the ones with the best detoxifying properties and the lowest levels of harmful contaminants. This suggests that ancient people weren't simply eating dirt out of desperation. They were making informed choices based on experience and environmental knowledge. In the modern medical world, we still use similar substances. Bentonite clay, for example, is sold as a detox remedy, toothpaste ingredient, and skin treatment. Kaolin, derived from white clay, is an active ingredient in over-the-counter medicines. For diarrhea, these products are marketed with sleek packaging and scientific language, but their roots are ancient, connecting directly to the practices of people who lived thousands of years ago. Yet despite this continuity, there remains a cultural divide between what is considered modern medicine and what is labeled as folk practice or superstition. Geophagy sits at this intersection, simultaneously dismissed by some and embraced by others. It's a reminder that the history of medicine is not a straight line from ignorance to enlightenment, but a complex web of trial, tradition, and rediscovery. In the next chapter, we'll explore the role of earth-eating in religious and spiritual ceremonies. How did ancient people connect the act of consuming clay with their beliefs about the gods, the afterlife, and the cycle of life and death? We'll look at rituals from the Americas, Africa, and Asia, where the earth was not just medicine, but a sacred substance, used to link the human body to the divine. So as you listen, take a deep breath, close your eyes if you wish, and imagine the feel of cool clay between your fingers. Think of the generations of people who turned to the earth not out of ignorance, but out of a deep, instinctual wisdom, a connection to the ground beneath their feet that goes beyond hunger and into the realm of healing. The story of eating dirt is not just about nutrition or survival. It's about our relationship with the world, with nature, and with the mystery of life itself. And the journey isn't over yet. As the story of earth-eating unfolds, it becomes clear that this practice was never just about the body, it was about the spirit too. Across ancient civilizations, the act of consuming earth was often part of religious and ceremonial life, ritual that tied humans to the cosmos, the gods, and the cycles of creation and decay. To understand this, imagine standing beneath a sky full of stars thousands of years ago, before the hum of machines or the glow of electric lights. The earth beneath your feet isn't just soil, it's a sacred force. In many ancient cultures, the earth was not seen as dead matter, but as a living entity, a mother, a goddess, or a spirit. Eating the earth wasn't just about healing sickness. It was about absorbing the power of the land, grounding oneself in the rhythms of nature, and participating in the mystery of life itself. Take, for example, the ancient rituals of Mesoamerica, where earth consumption was woven into religious ceremonies, honoring the gods of fertility and harvest. The Aztecs, for instance, performed elaborate rituals during times of drought or disease, offering clay figurines to the gods and sometimes consuming small amounts of earth during sacred feasts. These rituals were not random acts of desperation. They were carefully structured ceremonies meant to restore cosmic balance. In their worldview, humans were created from earth and blood. The gods had shaped the first humans from clay, giving them life through sacrifice. By eating earth, participants symbolically returned to their origins, acknowledging their dependence on the land and the divine. Similarly, in the Andes, the Inca and earlier Andean civilizations held ceremonies involving earth and clay. Shamans, known as Pacos, performed rituals to honor Pachamama, the Earth Mother, making offerings of coca leaves, chicha, a fermented drink, and sometimes earth itself. Ingesting small amounts of sacred soil during these rituals was a way to connect with Pachamama directly, to absorb her essence and ask for her protection. Even today, Quechua communities in the Andes perform Pachamama ceremonies, burying offerings in the ground, and in some cases, tasting the earth as a sign of reverence. This practice reflects a worldview where the land is not just a resource, but a living relative, a provider, protector, and healer. In Africa, similar beliefs persisted. Among the Fon people of Benin, earth consumption was part of Vodun religious ceremonies. The earth was seen as a mediator between the living and the ancestors, and consuming small amounts of clay during rituals was thought to open spiritual channels, allowing communication with the spirits of the dead. Sacred clays from specific locations were believed to hold unique powers, their energy tied to the spirits residing in those places. In some cases, the clay was mixed with water and herbs to create a ritual drink shared among participants. These ceremonies were not just about healing physical illness, but about cleansing the soul, protecting the community from evil forces, and maintaining harmony with the unseen world. Across Asia, similar traditions developed. In India, the practice of Bhumi Puja, the worship of the earth, often involved symbolic acts of touching, tasting, or offering earth to the gods. Before building a house or planting crops, families performed rituals to honor the soil, sometimes placing small amounts of earth on the tongue to signify unity with nature. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest religious texts in the world, contains hymns praising the earth as a nurturing mother. Ancient Indian healers, blending Ayurveda with spiritual practice, viewed earth not only as a medicinal substance, but as a sacred element of the Panchamahabhuta, the five great elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. Consuming earth in controlled rituals was a way to balance these elements within the body. In Tibet, certain sects of Buddhist monks practiced Chod, a ritual meditation that involved confronting the impermanence of the body. Some versions of this practice included symbolic acts of eating earth or visualizing the body, returning to the soil as a way to break attachment to the material world. Ingesting earth became a metaphor for humility, mortality, and the acceptance of life cycles. Even in the Greco-Roman world, where medicine and religion often overlapped, earth consumption carried spiritual weight. The Eleusinian Mysteries, one of the most sacred religious rites in ancient Greece, involved secret rituals dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, goddesses of the earth, harvest, and the underworld. While the exact details of these ceremonies remain shrouded in secrecy, scholars believe they included symbolic acts of consuming substances that represented the earth's power, possibly including clay or soil mixed with sacred drinks. The goal was to experience a connection with the divine, to understand life, death, and rebirth through ritual immersion in the earth's essence. In Rome, soldiers and citizens alike carried small amulets of clay from sacred sites, sometimes consuming tiny fragments before battle or during illness, believing that the earth's strength would protect them. The philosopher Pliny the Elder wrote about specific clays used not only for healing, but for spiritual protection, noting that earth from particular temples was consumed to prevent disease and misfortune. This blending of medicine and magic persisted through the centuries, influencing medieval and Renaissance practices. In Christian Europe, the idea of humankind's creation from dust and return to dust gave spiritual meaning to earth consumption. Pilgrims visiting holy sites sometimes carried home small vials of soil, mixing it into water or wine to create a sacred drink believed to heal both body and soul. During times of plague, some communities consumed earth from churchyards or the graves of saints, believing it held protective powers. This may sound morbid to modern ears, but to medieval minds, it was a logical extension of faith. The body came from the earth. By consuming earth, one reaffirmed the cycle of life and death, under God's watchful eye. In the Islamic world, the concept of turboclase tablets made from sacred soil holds special significance, especially among Shia Muslims. These tablets, often made from earth from Karbala, are used during prayer as a place for prostration, symbolizing humility before God. In some traditions, small amounts of this earth are consumed during times of illness or spiritual crisis, connecting the act of prayer with physical healing. This practice echoes older traditions while remaining part of contemporary religious life. Across cultures, these rituals reveal a common thread: the human desire to connect with the earth not just as a resource, but as a sacred entity. Eating earth in these contexts becomes a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, a way to honor ancestors, gods, and the natural world. It's a practice rooted in humility, gratitude, and the recognition of life's fragility. Imagine this ceremony: a quiet gathering under moonlight, elders chanting prayers, the soft crumbling of clay between fingers. Participants share the earth in small, deliberate doses, each grain a symbol of connection to the land, to each other, to the mysteries of existence. This is not just about health. It's about meaning, belonging, and continuity. Today, many of these rituals continue, though they are often misunderstood or dismissed by outsiders. Modern medicine tends to separate the body from the spirit, treating illness as a mechanical failure rather than a holistic imbalance. But in traditional societies, healing encompasses both realms. The earth is not merely dirt, it is medicine, magic, and mother. In the next part of this story, we'll look at how colonialism and modernity tried to suppress earth-eating practices, labeling them as primitive or dangerous. We'll explore how medical authorities in the 19th and 20th centuries attempted to eradicate these traditions, and how, despite these efforts, earth medicine survived underground, sometimes literally passed down in whispers and secret practices. So stay with me, take a breath, and reflect on the sacredness of the ground beneath your feet. The story of why ancient people ate dirt is also a story of resilience, resistance, and the human need to find healing in the most fundamental elements of life. As the world shifted into the age of colonial expansion, industrial revolutions, and scientific discoveries, the ancient practice of eating earth found itself caught between two worlds, one of tradition and one of modernity. The colonial powers of Europe, sweeping across Africa, Asia, and the Americas in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, did not merely conquer land. They sought to control culture, medicine, and belief systems. Practices like geophagy, which had survived for millennia, suddenly became targets of suppression. To the colonial mindset, earth-eating appeared primitive, backward, and in need of eradication. European doctors and missionaries, armed with new scientific ideas, but often lacking cultural sensitivity, labeled the consumption of clay and soil as a sign of ignorance or moral failing. They viewed it as something to be cured, not understood. Reports from British colonies in Africa described clay eating among enslaved populations and rural villagers with a mix of fascination and disgust. Colonial doctors in Ghana, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone wrote medical reports cataloging the practice, calling it a peculiar vice or a strange craving of the savages, ignoring its long history and medicinal roots. They failed to see that clay had been part of these societies' medical and spiritual life for generations. In the Americas, similar patterns unfolded. During the era of slavery in the southern United States and the Caribbean, enslaved Africans continued their traditions of eating clay, sometimes as a way to cope with the brutal conditions of plantation life. The practice provided both physical relief from gastrointestinal problems and a psychological connection to ancestral practices, helping maintain identity and resilience under oppression. Slave owners, however, viewed geophagy as a pathology, a sign of illness or rebellion. Some believed it was a method of slow suicide, an attempt by the enslaved to waste away rather than endure bondage. Others thought it was simply a strange compulsion needing correction. They ordered punishments for those caught eating dirt, failing to grasp the deeper cultural meanings behind the act. Medical authorities of the 19th century wrote papers diagnosing earth eating as a disease rather than a tradition. They coined terms like cachexia africana, describing it as a specific wasting illness affecting enslaved people who consumed clay. But what they ignored was the context: the forced relocation, the loss of traditional diets, the exposure to new environmental stresses, and the emotional trauma of slavery, all contributed to the continuation of clay-eating practices as a form of survival. In South America, colonial powers encountered similar behaviors among indigenous populations. Spanish missionaries in the Andes noted the consumption of clay mixed with potatoes, failing to recognize the detoxifying function of the practice. To them, it was another mark of the so-called barbarity of native peoples. Yet these traditions persisted even as colonial authorities tried to suppress them. In the Philippines, Spanish colonists observed local women eating clay during pregnancy, especially in rural villages. The practice was recorded in missionary diaries and colonial health records, but instead of studying its purpose, colonial officials tried to eliminate it. They failed, of course. The earth is not so easily erased from human culture. Even as modern medicine advanced, the connection to the earth remained deeply rooted in the hearts and habits of people across the globe. But the stigma grew as Western medicine became dominant. Traditional practices were pushed underground. People began to hide their earth-eating habits, fearing judgment or punishment. What was once a communal ritual became a private secret. Yet despite this pressure, the practice of geophagy survived. In parts of Africa, clay markets continued to thrive, selling baked earth for medicinal and cultural use. In rural parts of the southern United States, small bags of white clay were sold discreetly at local shops, passed hand to hand like contraband, yet respected within the community. Anthropologists and ethnographies in the 20th century began to re-examine these practices, realizing they were not simply remnants of superstition, but parts of complex cultural systems. Researchers in the 1930s and 1940s traveled to remote villages in Africa, the Americas, and Asia, documenting the use of clay in traditional medicine. They found that earth-eating often increased during times of stress pregnancy, famine, or social upheaval. This suggested a connection between geophagy and coping mechanisms, both physical and emotional. Modern scientists started analyzing the clays consumed by different communities, testing them in laboratories. What they found surprised them. Many of these clays contained kaolinite, smectite, and bentonite, minerals known to bind toxins, neutralize stomach acids, and protect the gut lining. Some clays exhibited antibacterial properties, killing harmful microbes while leaving beneficial bacteria untouched. In some cases, the clays acted as natural antibiotics or antidiarrheals, providing relief in regions where modern medicine was scarce or unaffordable. Despite these findings, the medical establishment remained divided. Some doctors viewed geophagy as a dangerous practice, focusing on cases where contaminated soil caused harm. Others began to see it as a form of traditional knowledge worth preserving and studying. The debate continues today, but the historical record is clear. The human relationship with Earth has always been complex, blending necessity, ritual, and survival. In the 20th century, global migration carried earth-eating traditions to new places. Immigrants from Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America brought their practices with them to cities like New York, London, and Paris. In immigrant neighborhoods, shops quietly sold packets of clay under the counter, serving customers who carried on ancestral customs far from home. Pregnant women, in particular, sought out these clays to ease nausea and anxiety, maintaining a connection to cultural identity even in foreign lands. Meanwhile, modern marketing found a way to repackage ancient practices for profit. Health food stores began selling detox clays in sleek jars, advertising them as natural cleansers for the modern body. Spa treatments offered mud baths and clay masks, drawing on the same mineral properties that ancient people had trusted for centuries. Pharmaceutical companies developed clay-based medicines for gastrointestinal issues, extracting the active ingredients from the earth while distancing the products from their cultural roots. The irony was striking. What had once been mocked as primitive became fashionable under the right branding. Yet in many places, the stigma remained. People who consumed clay outside of a spa or health food context were still labeled as backward or unhealthy. The media often portrayed geophagy in sensational terms, focusing on extreme cases rather than understanding the broader cultural and historical context. This split between commercial acceptance and social stigma reflects a deeper tension in how modern societies view traditional knowledge. We are quick to adopt ancient remedies when they come in polished packages, but hesitant to respect the communities that kept those traditions alive through centuries of marginalization. The practice of earth-eating stands at this crossroads, a symbol of both resilience and misunderstanding. As we look back at the colonial era, it's clear that the suppression of geophagy was not just about health, it was about control. Colonial powers sought to reshape the bodies and minds of the people they ruled, imposing new systems of medicine that often ignored or erased indigenous knowledge. Yet the earth, silent and patient, remained. People continued to turn to it, trusting in its familiar texture, its coolness in the mouth, its grounding presence in times of uncertainty. In the next part of our story, we'll explore how modern science is rediscovering the medicinal properties of clay, turning once again to the earth in search of cures for contemporary problems. We'll learn about the latest research into antibacterial clays, wound healing, and gut health, and see how ancient practices are influencing cutting-edge medical treatments. So take a deep breath, imagine the feel of earth between your fingers, and consider the long, unbroken chain of human history that connects us all to the ground beneath our feet. The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just a relic of the past, it's a living tradition, evolving with us, reminding us of where we came from and perhaps even where we're headed next. As the 21st century unfolds, something curious is happening. Modern science, once so eager to dismiss ancient practices like geophagy, is quietly turning back to the earth, rediscovering the medicinal properties that humans have known intuitively for thousands of years. What was once labeled superstition is now being tested in laboratories, dissected under microscopes, and published in peer-reviewed journals. But the questions remain the same. Can Earth really heal? And if so, how did ancient people know? Let's begin with the gut, where much of the body's health resides. Modern medicine now understands that the gastrointestinal tract is not just a digestive system. It's a complex ecosystem filled with trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that affect everything from immunity to mood. This microbiome, as it's called, is delicate and easily disrupted by modern life. Processed foods, antibiotics, stress, and environmental toxins can throw it out of balance. Researchers have started to look at ancient remedies for ways to restore this balance. And one of the most promising is clay. Studies have shown that certain clays, particularly bentonite and kaolinite, can bind to harmful bacteria like E. coli and Clostridium difficile, neutralizing them without harming the beneficial microbes that keep the gut healthy. These clays work like molecular sponges, trapping toxins and preventing them from entering the bloodstream. In parts of Africa and South America, traditional healers have used clay to treat diarrhea for centuries, a practice now validated by scientific studies. In fact, the World Health Organization has acknowledged the potential of clay-based treatments in managing gastrointestinal illnesses, especially in areas where pharmaceutical options are limited. Pharmaceutical companies have even developed synthetic versions of medicinal clays, marketing them as antidiarrheal medications under names like diasmictite. But the story doesn't stop at the gut. Researchers at Arizona State University and other institutions have discovered that some clays have antibacterial properties so powerful they can kill antibiotic-resistant bacteria, like MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. These clays contain naturally occurring metal ions, such as iron, copper, and zinc, that disrupt bacterial cell walls, essentially poisoning harmful microbes while leaving human cells unharmed. This discovery has sparked a new field of research called geomicrobiology, where scientists study the interactions between earth materials and microbes. The potential applications are vast. Wound dressings made from antibacterial clay, topical creams to prevent infection, and even treatments for drug-resistant diseases that threaten modern healthcare. In France, researchers at the University of Poitiers have tested clays from specific regions, confirming their ability to fight bacteria and promote wound healing. Some hospitals in Africa already use clay poultices in traditional medicine, applying them to cuts, burns, and ulcers with remarkable success. These methods are now being integrated into modern clinical trials, blurring the line between ancient knowledge and scientific innovation. The benefits of clay go beyond infection control. Some studies suggest that clay consumption may help remove heavy metals like lead and mercury from the body, binding them in the digestive tract and preventing absorption. This has led to experiments in environmental health, where clay is being tested as a potential remedy for communities exposed to toxic pollutants. In regions affected by industrial contamination, where children suffer from lead poisoning due to old paint or polluted soil, clay-based therapies might offer a simple, low-cost intervention. Imagine the irony. The very earth that people have eaten for millennia, once dismissed as dirt, could now be the key to solving modern environmental crises. But as with all medicines, the details matter. Not all clays are created equal. Some contain harmful substances or bacteria, while others lack the necessary chemical structure to be effective. That's why researchers are cataloging clays from around the world, mapping their mineral compositions and testing their properties. They're trying to understand what ancient people knew intuitively, that certain soils heal while others harm. This has led to a resurgence of interest in ethnomedicine, the study of traditional healing practices. Anthropologists, chemists, and medical doctors are collaborating with indigenous communities to learn how clays are selected, prepared, and used. In doing so, they're uncovering a vast body of knowledge passed down through generations, often in oral traditions that have survived colonization, globalization, and modern skepticism. These collaborations are not just academic exercises, they're acts of cultural preservation, recognizing the value of wisdom that exists outside of laboratories and textbooks. Meanwhile, the wellness industry has seized upon the clay trend, marketing products like bentonite detox drinks, clay masks, and mineral supplements to health-conscious consumers. Spas offer mud wraps and clay facials, promising to draw out impurities and rejuvenate the skin. While some of these claims are exaggerated, Others are grounded in real science. The skin, like the gut, can benefit from the absorbent and antimicrobial properties of certain clays. Dermatologists have studied the use of clay in treating acne, eczema, and fungal infections, noting its ability to remove excess oil, reduce inflammation, and create an environment hostile to pathogens. But the commercialization of clay has also raised ethical questions. Who profits from these ancient remedies? Are the communities that preserve this knowledge being compensated or credited? In some cases, companies patent clay-based products without acknowledging the cultural origins of the practice, repeating the same patterns of exploitation that occurred during colonial times. This has sparked debates about biopiracy, where corporations extract natural resources and traditional knowledge without sharing the benefits. Some organizations are working to change this, creating partnerships with indigenous groups to ensure fair compensation and cultural respect. The tension between commercial use and cultural heritage highlights a broader issue. How do we integrate ancient practices into modern life without erasing their meaning? For the people who have kept Earth medicine alive, clay is not just a product, it's part of a worldview, a relationship with the land, and a connection to ancestors. This connection is deeply personal. In rural parts of the southern United States, older generations still speak of eating chalk or licking clay walls as a childhood memory, tied to pregnancy, illness, or simply a craving they couldn't explain. In parts of Africa and the Caribbean, clay eating remains a private practice shared among trusted friends and family members. For these individuals, the resurgence of scientific interest in clay is both validating and bittersweet. It acknowledges what they've always known, that the earth can heal, but it also risks turning a sacred tradition into just another commodity. As we move forward, it's important to balance innovation with respect. Scientists and doctors can learn from traditional practices, but they must do so ethically, honoring the communities that preserved this knowledge through centuries of hardship and marginalization. In the next part of this story, we'll take a closer look at the psychological aspects of earth eating. Why do people crave clay and soil, even when they know the risks? Is it purely biological, or does it fulfill deeper emotional needs? We'll explore the connection between geophagy and mental health, examining how comfort, control, and ritual play a role in this ancient habit. We'll hear stories from people today who still practice geophagy, not out of necessity, but because it brings them peace, grounding them in a fast-paced world. So as you listen, take a moment to reflect on your own connection to the earth. When was the last time you touched soil with your bare hands, walked barefoot on grass, or felt the cool texture of clay between your fingers? The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just about medicine. It's about memory, belonging, and the deep human desire to stay connected to the world beneath our feet. As we continue this journey into the forgotten world of earth eating, we now enter a more personal psychological landscape, a place where biology, memory, and emotion intertwine in complex ways. For some people, the craving for clay or soil is not just about survival, nutrition, or detoxification. It's about comfort. It's about grounding, both literally and figuratively, in a world that often feels overwhelming. This craving has a name, Pica, a condition defined by the desire to eat non-food substances such as ice, chalk, paper, or dirt. But geophagy, the practice of intentionally eating earth, is a special kind of pica, one that carries deep historical roots and cultural significance. Scientists are still trying to understand why the human brain develops such cravings. Some theories point to mineral deficiencies, iron, zinc, or calcium shortages can trigger the urge to consume soil. But the full explanation is likely more complicated. Imagine for a moment a woman in the rural south of the United States in the early 20th century. She sits on her front porch, quietly scraping small pieces of clay from the wall of her home, rolling them between her fingers, savoring the texture. She knows it might not be considered proper or acceptable, but it calms her. It gives her a sense of control in a life filled with hardship. Her mother did the same. Her grandmother, too. For her, this is not sickness. It's a ritual, a tradition, and a relief. Across time and cultures, similar stories emerge. Pregnant women in West Africa describe the craving for clay as something that comes from deep within, an urge that cannot be ignored. It's not just about nausea or stomach pain. It's about soothing the mind, anchoring oneself in the body during a time of profound transformation. For centuries, midwives and healers understood this. They didn't pathologize the craving, they honored it, providing specific types of clay known to be safe, baking it gently to reduce risks, and offering it in carefully measured amounts. In modern psychological terms, geophagy can be seen as a coping mechanism, a way to manage stress, trauma, or uncertainty. The act of eating earth engages the senses, the texture, the taste, the smell, all of which can have calming effects. It becomes a form of self-soothing, much like rocking, humming, or holding a cherished object. In chaotic environments, these small rituals provide a sense of stability. For people living through famine, war, slavery, or displacement, the act of consuming earth could offer a moment of control in an otherwise uncontrollable world. It's a gesture of connection to the land, a way to hold on to something real when everything else feels fragile. In psychological studies, patients who practice geophagy often report feelings of relief, satisfaction, and calm after eating clay. These sensations are not just imagined, they have biological underpinnings. The minerals in certain clays can bind to stomach acids, reducing gastrointestinal discomfort, which in turn calms the nervous system. There's also the tactile pleasure of the ritual itself, preparing the clay, breaking it into pieces, tasting it slowly. It becomes a meditative act, a pause in the day's struggles. For some, it's almost like a prayer. Modern therapy recognizes similar patterns in other behaviors. People with anxiety may chew ice, bite their nails, or engage in repetitive movements. These actions are not about the object itself, but about the state of mind they produce. They create a rhythm, a pattern, something predictable and soothing in an unpredictable world. Geophagy fits into this category, but with the added layers of history, culture, and tradition. In many cases, the practice is passed down through families, becoming part of personal and collective identity. Anthropologists have documented stories from women who remember their grandmothers baking clay in the oven, carefully slicing it into wafers and storing it in cloth bags. These memories are filled with warmth and nostalgia, not shame. The clay becomes a symbol of resilience, of continuity, of comfort. But the modern world often views these practices through a lens of pathology. Medical professionals may diagnose Pica as a disorder without asking about its cultural context. They may prescribe iron supplements or behavioral therapy, assuming the craving is a symptom to be eliminated. While in some cases, intervention is necessary, especially when harmful. Soils are involved. The broader picture is more nuanced. Not all geophagy is dangerous. When done with knowledge and care, it can be a benign, even beneficial practice. Yet the stigma remains. People who eat clay often hide the habit from friends, doctors, and even family members, fearing judgment. This secrecy can create a cycle of shame, making it harder to access safe, informed guidance. Imagine, for example, a pregnant woman in a modern city walking past a health food store selling bentonite clay detox kits. She knows the store's products are considered trendy, but if she buys a piece of raw clay from a local market and chews it to ease her nausea, she risks being labeled unhealthy or strange. This contradiction reflects a cultural blind spot, failure to see the difference between corporate wellness trends and traditional practices. One is marketed as enlightened self-care. The other is dismissed as backward. But both stem from the same human impulse: to feel better, to soothe the body and mind, to connect with something elemental. Psychologists are beginning to explore the sensory grounding aspect of geophagy. The taste of earth, often described as metallic, mineral-rich, or even sweet, triggers responses in the brain that can evoke safety and familiarity. The texture: smooth clay, a gritty soil engages tactile pathways that are closely linked to emotional regulation. In times of stress, these sensory experiences can reduce panic, slow breathing, and create a sense of presence in the moment. This is not magic, it's biology. Our brains are wired to seek comfort through the senses, and earth, as strange as it may seem, provides that for some people. In therapeutic settings, similar techniques are used to manage trauma. Patients might use sand trays, clay modeling, or nature-based therapies to reconnect with their bodies and emotions. These practices acknowledge what traditional societies have always known: that touch, texture, and connection to the earth can heal. Of course, the risks of geophagy should not be ignored. Consuming contaminated soil can lead to serious health problems, including parasitic infections, lead poisoning, or intestinal blockages. But the solution is not to shame the practice into extinction. It's to provide safe alternatives, to educate without erasing culture, and to support people in making informed choices. Some health programs have begun to do this, working with communities to identify safe clays, test them for toxins, and preserve the ritual aspects of the practice, while minimizing harm. These programs recognize that geophagy is not just about the body, it's about identity, memory, and resilience. In the next part of our story, we'll explore how geophagy intersects with art, literature, and philosophy. Throughout history, writers and thinkers have used the metaphor of eating earth to explore themes of mortality, humility, and the human connection to the natural world. We'll look at how poets, philosophers, and storytellers have woven the image of dust, soil, and clay into their works, reminding us of our shared origin and inevitable return to the earth. So as you listen, consider the role of ritual in your own life. What small actions do you perform to find comfort in difficult times? What sensory experiences bring you back to yourself when the world feels chaotic? The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just about strange medical practices. It's about being human, about finding peace in the simplest of things, and about honoring the deep, ancient bond between our bodies and the ground beneath our feet. As we reach the midpoint of this journey into the strange history of earth-eating, let's pause to explore how the act of consuming dirt has also lived in the world of metaphor, symbol, and story. Throughout human history, the image of dust, soil, and clay has appeared in art, literature, and philosophy, not just as a literal substance to be consumed, but as a symbol of life's fragility, of humility, and of the eternal cycle of life and death. The human relationship with earth is not merely physical, it is deeply poetic, woven into our language, our rituals, and our imagination. In ancient texts, the phrase, "From dust you came, and to dust you shall return," captures a universal truth, that all life begins and ends in the soil. This idea transcends religion and geography. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in human history, tells of a hero who seeks immortality but learns that his destiny is to return to the earth like all mortals. The Sumerians, who lived in Mesopotamia over 4,000 years ago, believed that humans were molded from clay by the gods, shaped like pottery on a divine wheel. In this belief, eating earth wasn't just a medical act, it was a return to origin, a connection to the material that made the human body in the first place. The Bible echoes this sentiment in the book of Genesis, where Adam, the first man, is said to be formed from the dust of the ground. The Hebrew word for earth, Adama, is directly linked to Adam's name, emphasizing the bond between human life and soil. Across cultures, this symbolism repeats. The Quran speaks of humanity's creation from clay. In Hindu mythology, the god Brahma fashions the first people from the earth, breathing life into lumps of mud. The symbolism of clay and earth represents both creation and decay, reminding us of our beginnings and our endings. Poets have long used the imagery of earth to explore mortality. Shakespeare, in Hamlet, muses on the fate of kings and clowns, alike who all return to dust. In the famous graveyard scene, Hamlet holds the skull of Yorick, the court jester, and reflects on how even the mighty fall to earth. This scene is not just about death, it's about the equality of all life in the face of decay. Philosophers, too, have pondered the meaning of earth. The Stoic thinkers of ancient Rome taught that life's troubles are small when compared to the vastness of nature. They urged humility, reminding people that pride and ambition are meaningless in the end because we all become part of the soil. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, wrote in his Meditations that humans are souls carrying around a corpse, destined to return to the earth. The metaphor of soil, clay, and dust becomes a tool for reflection, a way to grasp life's impermanence. But earth is not just a symbol of death, it is also a symbol of healing and renewal. In African oral traditions, the earth is seen as a womb, a place where life regenerates. Some folk tales describe the earth as a living being, capable of feeling, breathing, and nurturing those who walk upon it. To eat the earth in these stories is to accept its gift, to partake in its wisdom, and to acknowledge one's place in the cosmic order. In Native American storytelling, earth is often personified as Mother Earth, a provider who sustains all life. Some tribes tell of the earth's clay being used to shape the first humans, and consuming earth is part of certain ceremonies to honor this relationship. The Hopi people, for example, include earth in their spiritual rituals, using it to connect to ancestors and to the spirit world. The idea of earth as medicine, not just for the body, but for the soul, runs deep. In literature, writers have used the act of eating dirt to represent grief, humility, or penance. In some ancient cultures, mourners would throw dust on their heads, or even taste the earth as a way of expressing sorrow. This wasn't seen as strange. It was a physical manifestation of grief and reminder of life's temporary nature. In modern novels and poetry, earth-eating sometimes appears as a metaphor for desperation or resilience. Writers explore characters who consume dirt during times of famine, exile, or emotional collapse, but these acts are rarely portrayed as purely pathological. Instead, they symbolize endurance, a refusal to let go of the earth even when everything else is lost. The earth becomes a last refuge, a final connection to life when all else fails. In art, the use of clay and soil carries similar meanings. Sculptors shape clay into figures, knowing that it represents both life's form and its return to formlessness. In some cultures, artists mix earth into paint, using soil from sacred sites to create works that honor ancestors or tell spiritual stories. The tactile experience of working with clay mirrors the ancient rituals of earth-eating, a hands-on interaction with the raw material of existence. Even in modern therapy, clay is used as a medium for expression and healing. Art therapists encourage patients to mold clay as a way to process trauma, grief, or anxiety. The act of shaping the earth with one's hands can release emotions locked inside the body, much like the ancient practices of consuming earth were believed to cleanse not just the stomach, but the spirit. The symbolism of earth extends into language. We speak of being down to earth to describe someone humble and grounded. We say someone is salt of the earth to praise their honesty and simplicity. In times of loss, we bury loved ones and speak of them returning to the earth, completing the cycle of life. These phrases echo ancient beliefs, showing how deeply the idea of earth is embedded in our consciousness. Even in scientific contexts, the language of soil and clay carries weight. Geologists call certain layers of earth horizons, acknowledging the depth and complexity of the ground beneath us. Archaeologists sift through soil to uncover the past, literally digging through layers of human history. They find clay pots, figurines, and tools evidence of how intimately our ancestors interacted with the earth. Some of these artifacts still contain traces of the clays that were eaten, revealing the continuity of this practice across time. In environmental philosophy, thinkers speak of the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that Earth itself is a living system, a self-regulating organism that maintains conditions for life. This concept, while modern in its scientific framing, echoes ancient beliefs about the Earth's sentience. To eat the Earth, in this view, is not just a medical act, but a participation in the planet's life cycle. It's a way of acknowledging that we are part of the Earth, not separate from it. As we reflect on these themes, it becomes clear that the story of Earth eating is not just about strange medical foods, it's about meaning. It's about how humans have tried to make sense of their place in the world through rituals, symbols, and stories. Eating Earth is both literal and metaphorical, a practice that touches the body and the mind, the past and the present. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore the environmental and ecological dimensions of geophagy. How does the Earth itself change when humans consume it? What are the consequences of mining, harvesting, and trading clay in modern times? We'll look at the balance between tradition and sustainability, examining how ancient practices adapt to a world facing new environmental challenges. So as you listen, consider the layers of earth beneath your feet, not just as dirt, but as memory, as history, and as a living part of human culture. The act of consuming clay is not only about nutrition or healing, it's about connection, humility, and the eternal return to the source from which we all come. As the story of earth eating continues, we now arrive at a question that connects the ancient world to modern life in a new and urgent way. How does the environment itself respond when humans consume the earth? In the past, gathering clay was a personal, small-scale act. Families collected small amounts from riverbanks, hillsides, or sacred sites, using the earth for medicine, ritual, and survival. But in today's globalized world, the demand for clay has transformed into an industry, raising concerns about sustainability, environmental impact, and ecological balance. What happens when the earth we eat becomes a commodity? To understand this, imagine a remote village in Africa where, for generations, people have harvested white clay from a specific hillside. They know exactly where to dig, how deep to go, and when to stop. The elders teach the younger generations how to recognize safe clay, how to bake it to remove impurities, and how to leave the landscape intact so that the earth can heal and regenerate. This is not exploitation, it's a relationship. The people take from the earth with respect, knowing that they must care for it in return. But now picture that same hillside today, after a mining company arrives with trucks, drills, and contracts, signed far away in distant cities. The clay is no longer collected for local use. It is extracted in bulk, packaged, and shipped around the world for cosmetic companies, wellness brands, and pharmaceutical firms. The villagers watch as the land is scarred, the soil stripped away, faster than it can replenish. The streams run murky with sediment, and the delicate balance between human need and environmental care begins to crumble. This is not just a hypothetical story, it's happening right now. The global market for clay, particularly bentonite, kaolinite, and other medicinal clays, has exploded in recent decades. Companies harvest clay for beauty products, detox supplements, industrial uses, and health remedies, often without considering the ecological consequences. Mining clay on a large scale disrupts ecosystems, alters waterways, and destroys habitats for plants and animals. In some places, clay mining has led to soil erosion, deforestation, and the collapse of traditional ways of life. Communities that once gathered earth for personal use find themselves cut off from their own land, unable to access the very resources their ancestors relied upon for generations. This raises important questions. How do we balance the benefits of clay consumption with the need to protect the earth itself? Can ancient practices survive in a world driven by profit and mass production? And what responsibilities do companies, consumers, and governments have to ensure that the earth is not overexploited in the name of health and beauty? Environmental scientists are beginning to study the sustainability of clay harvesting, mapping the regions most at risk from overmining. Some areas, like parts of West Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia, have become hotspots for clay extraction, with little regulation or oversight. The mining process often involves removing large sections of topsoil, which can lead to desertification, the loss of arable land, and long-term damage to local ecosystems. Water sources become polluted with clay runoff, affecting fish, plants, and human communities downstream. In some cases, entire landscapes are transformed, leaving behind scars that take decades or centuries to heal. The irony is profound. The very earth people eat for healing is being wounded in the process. This is not a new problem. Throughout history, humans have struggled to balance resource use with environmental stewardship. Ancient societies sometimes depleted their lands through overfarming, deforestation, or mining. But many also developed practices to maintain harmony with nature-rotating harvests, restricting access to sacred sites, and using ritual to remind people of their connection to the land. The challenge today is that global demand has outpaced these traditional systems. The clay used in a detox smoothie in New York might come from a mine in Kenya or Brazil, with no thought given to the people or places affected. Consumers often don't know where their products originate or what happens to the environment when clay is harvested on an industrial scale. This disconnect is part of a larger pattern in modern consumption, where natural resources are treated as infinite and anonymous. The story of clay reminds us that the earth is not just a backdrop to human life. It is a living, breathing system that sustains us. When we extract from it without care, we risk breaking the very cycles that keep us alive. Some organizations and communities are working to change this. In parts of Ghana and Nigeria, local groups have set up cooperatives to manage clay harvesting sustainably. They monitor the land, limit the amount of clay taken, and ensure that profits return to the community. These efforts combine traditional knowledge with modern environmental science, creating models that other regions can follow. In the Amazon, indigenous groups collaborate with environmental NGOs to protect clay-rich areas from industrial mining, arguing that the land holds not just economic value, but cultural and spiritual importance. Their advocacy challenges governments and corporations to rethink resource management. Even within the health and beauty industries, some companies are beginning to consider the environmental impact of clay sourcing. Ethical brands now advertise sustainably harvested clay, though the term is not always clearly defined. True sustainability means more than marketing. It requires real partnerships with local communities, transparent supply chains, and respect for the Earth's limits. Consumers, too, play a role in this story. By asking where products come from, choosing brands that prioritize environmental care, and supporting policies that protect ecosystems, individuals can help shift the market toward more responsible practices. But perhaps the most important step is to remember the lessons of the past. For ancient people, The earth was not just a resource, it was a teacher, a healer, and a home. They understood that taking from the earth came with responsibilities: to give back, to tread lightly, and to honor the cycles of nature. The act of eating earth, in its oldest forms, was about humility, not dominance. It was about acknowledging the body's connection to the ground, not exploiting it for profit. In today's world, where environmental crises loom large: climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, the practice of geophagy can offer more than medical insight. It can remind us of the deep ties between human health and planetary health. The soil we consume is part of a larger web of life, and when we harm the earth, we harm ourselves. In the next part of this story, we'll explore how climate change is affecting the availability and safety of medicinal clays. As temperatures rise, soils erode, and ecosystems shift, what happens to the ancient practice of earth eating? Will it survive in a world where the earth itself is under threat? We'll examine how changing climates are altering traditional landscapes, forcing communities to adapt and rethink their relationship with the ground beneath them. So as you listen, think about your own connection to the environment. The story of why ancient people hate dirt is not just about the past, it's about the present and the future. It's about learning to live in balance with the planet, to respect the earth's gifts without exhausting them, and to remember that every handful of soil holds a history, a mystery, and a warning. The earth feeds us, heals us, and eventually receives us when life ends. How we treat it now will shape the world we leave for generations to come. As we continue exploring the long, strange story of earth eating, we must now turn our attention to one of the most pressing challenges of our time: climate change and its impact on the very soil beneath our feet. For thousands of years, people have gathered specific clays and soils to use in healing rituals, medicinal practices, and survival strategies. But what happens when the earth itself begins to change? As temperatures rise, rainfall patterns shift, and ecosystems collapse. Ancient practice of geophagy faces new obstacles, forcing communities to adapt or risk losing this connection forever. Imagine a remote village where, for generations, women have walked to a sacred hill to gather clay used during pregnancy. This clay isn't just any soil. It's a specific mineral-rich layer known to ease nausea, soothe the stomach, and provide a sense of calm. The community has always known where to dig, how much to take, and how to prepare it safely. But now, the rains don't come as they once did. The rivers are drying. The soil is eroding. That once reliable clay deposit has been washed away by floods or baked into unusable rock by drought. The hill that held the earth medicine for centuries is crumbling under new environmental pressures. This isn't just a hypothetical story. It's happening across the globe. In Africa, Asia, and South America, communities that have practiced earth eating for generations are finding it harder to locate the safe, specific clays they've always used. Climate change accelerates soil degradation through desertification, erosion, and deforestation. Once stable landscapes are now unstable, and this has direct consequences for people who depend on the earth for food, medicine, and cultural practices. In some places, clay deposits are drying out or becoming contaminated. Changes in rainfall patterns alter the chemical composition of soils, sometimes increasing the concentration of harmful substances like arsenic or lead. Rising temperatures can trigger the release of ancient toxins trapped in permafrost or deep sediment, bringing new risks to communities that harvest the earth for consumption. The practice of eating clay is intimately tied to local knowledge, the wisdom of where to dig, when to gather, and how to process the earth safely. But as the climate shifts, this knowledge is under threat. Younger generations may not have access to the same quality of clay their elders relied upon. Traditional gathering sites disappear or become too dangerous to use. Entire cultural practices risk vanishing alongside the land itself. Scientists studying pedology, the science of soils, warn that we are entering an era of global soil crisis. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, nearly 33% of the world's soils are degraded due to erosion, pollution, salinization, and loss of organic matter. This not only affects agriculture and food security, but also the ancient medicinal uses of Earth. The soil is not a renewable resource on human timescales. It takes hundreds to thousands of years for rich clay deposits to form naturally. Climate change compresses this timeline, stripping away layers of Earth faster than they can be replaced. For people who rely on geophagy as part of cultural or medical life, this creates a dangerous situation. Some turn to substitutes using processed clays sold in markets or online stores, but these are not always safe or properly sourced. Without local control over the harvesting process, people risk consuming contaminated clays or artificial products that lack the therapeutic properties of traditional earths. Others give up the practice altogether, severing a link to ancestral knowledge that has survived for millennia. The psychological impact of this loss is profound. For many, eating earth is not just about nutrition or healing. It's about identity, belonging, and connection to place. When the earth changes, so does the sense of self. Climate change isn't just altering landscapes. It's altering cultural memory, eroding traditions as surely as it erodes the soil. Yet amid this crisis, some communities are fighting back. In parts of Kenya, Ghana, and Nigeria, local groups are partnering with scientists to map and protect traditional clay deposits. They study the mineral composition of soils, monitor environmental changes, and develop sustainable harvesting techniques that minimize damage to the landscape. These collaborations aim to preserve both the practice of geophagy and the ecosystems that support it. In South America, indigenous communities are reviving ancient land management techniques like terracing, controlled burns, and crop rotation, which help prevent erosion and protect sacred earth-gathering sites. By restoring balance to the land, they hope to ensure that future generations can continue to access healing clays. Climate scientists are also exploring ways to regenerate soil health on a global scale. Practices like regenerative agriculture, reforestation, and carbon sequestration in soils are gaining attention as potential solutions. These methods not only reduce greenhouse gases, but also rebuild the very foundation of life, a healthy, living earth. But this work requires a shift in mindset, from viewing the earth as a resource to be extracted, to seeing it as a partner in survival. The story of geophagy offers a model for this relationship. Ancient people understood the need to take only what was needed, to leave enough for regeneration, and to respect the land as a living entity. Modern society can learn from these lessons, applying them not just to clay, but to all forms of environmental stewardship. The climate crisis also opens new scientific frontiers in geophagy research. As ecosystems change, scientists are discovering clays and soils in new places, sometimes revealing deposits with unique properties never before studied. For example, some deep-sea clays have been found to possess antibacterial properties that could lead to new medicines. Arctic permafrost soils contain ancient microorganisms and minerals that might offer insights into healing, but also pose risks if unleashed without control. There's a paradox here. Climate change threatens traditional earth-eating practices. By destroying local environments, yet it also uncovers new earths in places once inaccessible. This presents ethical challenges. Should these newly exposed soils be harvested for medicine, or left untouched to preserve fragile ecosystems? Who gets to decide? And how can modern science respect the cultural history of geophagy while exploring its future potential? Some researchers advocate for a geomedical ethics, a framework that combines environmental science, cultural respect, and medical research. This approach would involve indigenous communities in decision-making processes, ensuring that the benefits of new discoveries are shared fairly and that traditional practices are protected. It also means acknowledging that geophagy is not just a scientific curiosity. It's a living tradition with real emotional and spiritual meaning. As the climate crisis intensifies, more people may find themselves turning to the earth for healing, not just physically, but psychologically. The anxiety, grief, and uncertainty of environmental collapse can create a longing for grounding, for reconnection with the natural world. For some, the act of touching, tasting, or holding earth becomes a way to cope with ecological grief, response to the feeling that the planet itself is slipping away. This is not mere nostalgia. It's a reminder that humans are part of the earth, not separate from it. Our bodies are composed of minerals that once lay in the soil. Our breath is tied to the plants that grow from the ground. Our survival depends on the health of the ecosystems beneath our feet. In the next part of our story, we'll explore how modern technology is both helping and complicating the study of geophagy. From genetic research on the gut microbiome to artificial intelligence mapping soil health, new tools are allowing scientists to understand the relationship between humans and the earth in unprecedented detail. But these advances also raise questions about control, ownership, and the future of traditional knowledge. Will technology help preserve the ancient practice of earth-eating, or will it commercialize and commodify it beyond recognition? So as you listen, consider the shifting ground beneath your own life, not just metaphorically, but literally. The earth is changing faster than at any point in human history. The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just a window into the past, it's a guidepost for how we might live in the future, in harmony with the planet or in conflict with it. The choice, as always, lies with us. As we move deeper into the modern world, the story of earth-eating is no longer confined to ancient rituals, sacred hills, or village healers. It has entered the realm of high technology, scientific laboratories, and digital mapping. Today, researchers are using genetic sequencing, artificial intelligence, and advanced mineral analysis to understand what ancient people may have learned through observation alone. The rise of microbiome science has opened new doors in explaining why certain clays and soils might interact beneficially with the human body, particularly the gut. In the past decade, geneticists have sequenced the bacteria living in the digestive tracts of people who regularly consume clay, discovering differences in microbial composition compared to those who do not. Some of these differences suggest protective effects. Certain clays appear to support the growth of beneficial bacteria while suppressing harmful strains. For example, kaolinite and bentonite clays have been shown to bind not only to toxins, but also to pathogenic bacteria, removing them from the gut without disturbing the delicate balance of other microorganisms. This aligns with observations from traditional cultures, where clay was used to manage diarrhea, food poisoning, and digestive discomfort. Modern metagenomic sequencing, which allows scientists to read the genetic material of entire bacterial communities, has revealed that people in rural regions who practice geophagy often have more diverse gut microbiomes, which is linked to better immune function and resilience to disease. Could it be that ancient people unknowingly optimized their gut health through the regular, controlled consumption of earth? Scientists are still cautious in their conclusions, but the evidence is growing. Meanwhile, AI-based soil analysis is revolutionizing how researchers identify and classify the properties of different clays. Using satellite imagery and machine learning algorithms, scientists can now map clay deposits across entire continents, predicting which regions contain mineral compositions that may have therapeutic potential. These tools analyze the reflectance of soil in various light spectrums, detecting subtle differences invisible to the human eye. This allows researchers to pinpoint specific sites where healing clays might be found, cross-referencing historical data with new technological insights. But with this knowledge comes responsibility. As technology enables faster and more efficient extraction of clay resources, there is a risk of overexploitation and cultural erasure. Who owns the data gathered from indigenous lands? Who profits from the commercialization of ancient remedies? These questions echo the ethical dilemmas faced in other areas of bioprospecting, where pharmaceutical companies extract knowledge, materials from traditional communities, without sharing benefits or acknowledging origins. Some organizations are working to create biocultural protocols, legal agreements that protect the rights of communities who possess ancestral knowledge about earth-eating and other traditional practices. These protocols aim to ensure that any commercial or scientific use of this knowledge involves fair compensation, co-authorship on research papers, and respect for cultural contexts. But enforcing these agreements is challenging in a world where data moves faster than law. The digital age has also brought new communities of geophagy practitioners together in online spaces. Social media platforms host groups where people share tips on safe clay consumption, recommend sources, and discuss the sensory and emotional experiences of earth-eating. In these forums, users swap recipes for clay preparation, review products, and connect over shared cravings and rituals. Some of these communities view clay eating as a lifestyle choice, blending traditional practices with modern wellness trends. Others treat it as a private comfort, something they don't discuss openly in offline life due to lingering stigma. The rise of e-commerce has further transformed the landscape. Online stores sell clays from around the world, often marketed under the banner of detoxification, gut health, or spiritual grounding. Some of these products are carefully sourced and tested for safety. Others are not, creating a market where quality varies widely. Without regulation, consumers face risks: contaminated clays, mislabeled products, or fraudulent claims. Yet the demand continues to grow, fueled by curiosity, cultural heritage, and a desire for natural remedies. In parallel, medical researchers are developing synthetic clays designed to mimic the properties of traditional earths, but without the environmental or health risks of mining. These lab-created clays are engineered at the nanoscale, allowing scientists to control their structure and behavior precisely. Some are being tested as delivery systems for medicine, capable of carrying drugs directly to the stomach or intestines while neutralizing harmful bacteria along the way. Others are explored for use in cancer treatments, wound healing, and even as coatings for medical implants to prevent infection. This fusion of ancient practice and cutting-edge science raises philosophical questions about what it means to heal with the earth. Is a synthetic clay still part of the same tradition? Does laboratory purification erase the cultural and spiritual dimensions of geophagy? Or is it simply a new chapter in humanity's long relationship with soil? Some argue that the essence of earth-eating is not about the specific substance consumed, but about the act itself, the ritual of grounding, the connection to nature, and the acknowledgement of human vulnerability. Whether the clay comes from a sacred hillside or a sterile lab, the symbolic gesture remains. To eat earth is to remember that we are made of it, sustained by it, and destined to return to it. Technology also plays a role in preserving traditional knowledge. Digital archives now collect oral histories, recipes, and practices related to geophagy, creating records that can survive environmental change or cultural loss. Anthropologists collaborate with elders to document the songs, prayers, and stories associated with earth-eating, recognizing that these elements are as important as the clays themselves. In some cases, 3D scanning and virtual reality are used to capture the landscapes where earth-eating traditions occur, creating immersive experiences that allow future generations to understand the full context of these practices, even if the physical sites are lost to climate change or development. Educational programs in universities are beginning to include Ethnopharmacology, the study of traditional medicines in their curricula, training new generations of scientists to approach earth-based healing with respect and cultural sensitivity. These programs teach students not just to analyze clay samples in a lab, but to understand the social, historical, and emotional dimensions of the practice. As we look to the future, the intersection of technology and tradition offers both promise and peril. On one hand, scientific tools can help validate and enhance the benefits of earth eating, making it safer and more accessible. On the other hand, the commercialization and digitization of this practice risks stripping it of its cultural roots, turning a sacred tradition into just another product on a shelf or app on a phone. The challenge is to find a balance to embrace innovation without erasing the wisdom of the past. This means listening to the voices of those who have kept these practices alive through generations of change and hardship. It means creating partnerships between scientists, healers, and communities where knowledge is shared, not stolen. It means acknowledging that healing is not just a chemical process, but a cultural one, woven into the stories we tell about ourselves, our bodies, and the earth. In the next part of our story, we'll explore personal testimonies from people around the world who still practice geophagy today. We'll hear from pregnant women in rural villages, city dwellers buying clay online, elders passing down recipes, and healers blending ancient methods with modern science. Their stories reveal the diversity of experiences with earth eating, from sacred ritual to everyday habit, from medical necessity to sensory comfort. So as you listen, think about the tools you use to connect with the world around you. Technology, tradition, memory, and sensation, all of these shape how we understand health, healing, and our place in nature. The story of why ancient people ate dirt is no longer just about the past. It's about how we move forward, honoring the earth while embracing the future, finding ways to balance innovation with reverence for the ground beneath our feet. Now let's shift from the global and technological to the deeply personal, exploring the real voices of people who continue to practice geophagy today. In a world increasingly disconnected from natural rhythms, where most people buy food in plastic packages and spend more time staring at screens than walking barefoot on the ground, there are still individuals who reach for the earth itself, not out of desperation, but out of tradition, comfort, and a sense of belonging. These modern earth eaters come from all walks of life, and their stories illuminate why this ancient practice persists despite stigma, misunderstanding, and medical debate. Consider, for example, Amina, a woman living in northern Ghana, pregnant. With her third child, she follows the same ritual her mother and grandmother did before her. Each morning, before breakfast, she unwraps a small cloth containing ailo, a baked white clay sourced from a particular hill outside her village. She scrapes off a piece with a knife, places it on her tongue, and lets it dissolve slowly, savoring the cool, chalky texture. For Amina, this is not strange, it's part of daily life. The clay calms her nausea, soothes her stomach, and gives her a sense of peace during the challenging months of pregnancy. She knows where the clay comes from, how it was prepared, and trusts its safety. Her community views the practice as normal, even necessary. Local markets sell ailo in small bundles, alongside vegetables and spices, acknowledging its place in both diet and culture. Across the ocean in rural Alabama, an older woman named Bernice shares a similar habit. She grew up watching her mother scrape clay from the red dirt banks near their home, bake it in the oven, and store it in glass jars. Bernice still buys clay from a discreet supplier who sells white dirt in small brown paper bags. She doesn't talk about it openly anymore, not since a doctor once told her it was dangerous, and a friend laughed at her for being backwards. But for Bernice, the habit is not just about craving minerals. It's about memory, comfort, and the grounding sensation of earth melting on her tongue. She eats small pieces in the evenings, especially when life feels stressful. "It just settles me down," she says quietly, her hands smoothing the edges of the paper bag. In Haiti, during times of economic hardship, some women make bonbon tea, small cakes of clay mixed with salt and shortening, drying them in the sun. While this practice has drawn criticism from outsiders, who see it as evidence of poverty and malnutrition, the people who make and eat these clay cakes tell a more complex story. Yes, sometimes it is about hunger, but it's also about tradition, about sharing food with neighbors, about the familiar taste of the earth in a world that often feels unstable. In South America, members of the Piaroa people in Venezuela mix clay with wild yucca roots, detoxifying the naturally occurring cyanide in the plant. For them, geophagy is not just a medical habit, it's survival science, passed down through generations. Their knowledge of which clays to use, when to harvest them, and how to prepare them safely is part of a larger body of ecological wisdom that sustains their community. In these testimonies, a pattern emerges. For many, eating earth is tied to specific times in life: pregnancy, childhood, sickness, or stress. It's not a constant craving, but a cyclical one, returning in moments when the body and mind seek grounding. Some people describe it as an addiction, while others view it as a ritual or comfort. The reasons are as varied as the individuals who practice it. Modern urban geophagy is also on the rise, though it often remains hidden. In New York City, London, and Paris, people buy clay online, joining private forums where they share tips on safe sources and preparation methods. These communities are diverse immigrants maintaining cultural practices, wellness enthusiasts seeking natural remedies, or individuals who simply enjoy the sensory experience. They exchange advice on how to bake clay, how to avoid harmful contaminants, and how to navigate social situations where the habit might be misunderstood. In interviews, many of these individuals express frustration with medical professionals, who dismiss their cravings as pathological without asking about cultural context. Others say they've been judged harshly by friends or family, leading them to keep their practice secret. For some, the secrecy adds a layer of shame, while for others, it becomes a private, almost sacred act of self-care. Psychologists studying modern geophagy have found that the act of eating earth can serve as a coping mechanism for anxiety, trauma, or loss. The tactile, sensory engagement of holding, smelling, and tasting clay provides a form of mindfulness, anchoring people in the present moment. It can become a meditative practice, similar to chewing gum, handling worry beads, or sipping herbal tea. Some describe it as a way to reconnect with childhood memories, with the feeling of playing in the dirt before adulthood taught them to fear germs or hide their instincts. For others, especially those who grew up in rural areas but now live in cities, eating clay is a way to maintain a connection to home. It's a small act of resistance against disconnection, a reminder that they are still part of the natural world even when surrounded by concrete and glass. Healers and traditional practitioners in various cultures continue to recommend clay for specific ailments. In parts of India, Ayurvedic doctors prescribe small amounts of Multani Mitti Fuller's earth for digestive problems, though always with caution and balance. In parts of Africa and South America, traditional healers prepare clay mixtures combined with herbs, creating remedies for stomach issues, skin problems, and spiritual cleansing. These practices are usually embedded in broader systems of knowledge, where earth eating is not isolated, but part of a holistic view of health. In some places, people gather together to prepare and consume earth, making it a communal event. They sing songs, share stories, and pass down knowledge about where to find the best clays, how to avoid harmful soils, and what rituals accompany the act. These gatherings reinforce social bonds, turning geophagy into an act of community rather than isolation. But the modern world complicates these traditions. As cities grow and rural lands disappear, access to clean, safe clay becomes harder. Industrial pollution contaminates soils that were once trusted. Younger generations, raised with modern health warnings, may abandon the practice out of fear or stigma. Yet for many, the habit persists, evolving with the times but rooted in the same human needs, for comfort, for healing, and for a connection to the ground beneath their feet. These personal stories challenge the simplistic narratives that often surround geophagy in the media. It's not just a bizarre habit, a sign of illness, or a relic of the past. It's a living practice, adaptable and resilient. It reflects the complexity of human relationships with food, medicine, culture, and the environment. In the next part of this story, we'll explore how geophagy intersects with other traditional and modern dietary practices. How does earth eating compare to the use of herbal medicine, fasting, fermentation, or other ancient health strategies? We'll look at the broader context of how humans have always used natural substances, not just for nutrition, but for balance, healing, and spiritual connection. We'll also consider how modern science is starting to validate some of these practices, blurring the lines between folk wisdom and medical fact. So as you listen, think about the small rituals in your own life that bring comfort or connection. Maybe it's the way you prepare a cup of tea, the foods you crave when you're sick, or the smells and textures that remind you of childhood. The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just about strange medical history. It's about the universal human search for grounding, for tradition, and for peace in a changing world. As the story of earth eating stretches further into the fabric of human history, it becomes clear that geophagy is not an isolated phenomenon. It exists alongside other ancient dietary and medical practices that blur the line between food and medicine, ritual and necessity. Throughout time, humans have consumed not only clay and soil, but also herbs, roots, fermented foods, ashes, charcoals, and minerals, creating a vast and varied pharmacopoeia of natural substances meant to balance the body, protect the mind, and heal the spirit. In this broader context, geophagy sits comfortably beside these other traditions, part of a larger pattern of human behavior that seeks to harmonize with nature rather than dominate it. Consider the use of herbal medicine, perhaps the most widely recognized of these ancient health strategies. Across every continent, people have gathered plants not only for nutrition, but for healing. Leaves to soothe fevers, roots to settle the stomach, barks to cleanse the blood. The knowledge of plants is as old as humanity itself. Just as earth eating involves careful selection of specific clays, herbal medicine requires the knowledge of which plants are helpful and which are harmful. Both practices rely on local ecosystems, observation, and generations of trial and error. In traditional Chinese medicine, for example, certain mineral substances are combined with herbs in powdered form. Gypsum, a soft sulfate mineral, is used to clear heat and reduce fevers, while cinnabar, mercury sulfide, has been used historically for calming the spirit, though modern practitioners avoid it due to toxicity concerns. These mineral medicines sit beside clay in the pharmacological texts of ancient China, reflecting a worldview where earth and plant, rock and root are all part of the healing system. In Ayurveda, the ancient Indian system of medicine, minerals and metals are processed through purification rituals called shodhana and marana, transforming them into therapeutic ashes known as bhasma. Certain earths, like red ochre or white clay, are also used, both internally and externally, for balancing the body's dashas vata, pitta, and kapha. These practices parallel geophagy, but with a different philosophical lens, focusing on balance and transformation rather than direct detoxification. Another ancient practice that mirrors geophagy is the use of charcoal for medical purposes. Burnt wood, reduced to fine black powder, has been consumed for thousands of years to to treat poisoning and digestive issues. Today, activated charcoal is still used in hospitals worldwide to bind toxins in cases of overdose or poisoning. Like clay, charcoal works through adsorption, trapping harmful substances and carrying them safely out of the body. In modern wellness circles, charcoal is sold in capsules and added to juices, much like bentonite clay is marketed for detoxification. These products capitalize on the same principles that ancient healers understood through empirical observation. Fermentation, too, occupies a place alongside geophagy in the history of human health. Fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, and natto introduce beneficial bacteria into the gut, supporting digestion and immunity. While clay binds and removes harmful microbes, fermented foods replenish and balance the gut flora, creating a complementary system of cleansing and nurturing. In some traditional diets, both clay and fermented foods are consumed together, reflecting an intuitive understanding of gut ecology long before the discovery of probiotics or the microbiome. Fasting is another ancient practice that connects to these ideas. Across religions and cultures, people have abstained from food not just for spiritual reasons, but to reset the body, purge impurities, and enhance clarity of mind. During fasts, the consumption of earth sometimes plays a role. Small amounts of clay are taken to ease hunger pangs, settle the stomach, or protect the body from toxins that might accumulate during periods of limited eating. This practice continues today in some communities, where clay is seen as a supportive aid during cleansing rituals. The broader picture that emerges from these traditions is one of adaptive strategies for survival. Humans have always faced environmental challenges, scarce food, exposure to toxins, disease outbreaks, and have developed complex ways to cope. Eating earth, like using herbs or fasting, is part of this adaptive toolkit, a method of navigating the uncertainties of life. It reflects a kind of ecological intelligence, a partnership with nature rather than a conquest of it. Modern nutrition science is beginning to recognize the wisdom in these ancient practices. Researchers studying traditional diets find that people who follow ancestral foodways, rich in fiber, fermented foods, and natural minerals tend to have lower rates of chronic diseases than those who adopt highly processed modern diets. The Western diet, with its emphasis on refined sugars, fats, and artificial additives, has disrupted gut health, leading to epidemics of obesity, diabetes, and autoimmune conditions. Some scientists speculate that reintroducing certain elements of traditional diets, including controlled geophagy, might help restore balance. For example, studies on clay supplementation in animals have shown improved gut health, reduced inflammation, and better nutrient absorption. Similar research in humans is ongoing, exploring whether specific clays can support digestion, reduce exposure to environmental toxins, and modulate the immune system. This research is not without controversy. Critics worry about safety. Clay can contain harmful substances like lead or parasites if not properly prepared. There are also concerns about encouraging practices that might be misused or misunderstood. But the conversation is shifting from outright dismissal to nuanced investigation. Scientists are asking, under what conditions can earth eating be beneficial? How do we ensure safety while preserving cultural traditions? What can modern medicine learn from these practices, and how can they be integrated responsibly? Some medical practitioners are already incorporating medical clays into treatment plans, especially for gastrointestinal disorders. Pharmaceutical products like diosmectita purified clay used to treat diarrhea are prescribed in Europe and parts of Asia. These treatments, derived from natural clays, are processed and standardized to ensure safety, but they originate from the same principles that guided ancient geophagy. In cosmetic and dermatological fields, clay masks and poultices are used to draw out impurities from the skin, reduce inflammation, and promote healing. These external applications mirror internal uses, highlighting the multifunctional nature of earth and human health. The connection between earth and body is not just metaphorical, it is chemical, biological, and evolutionary. Our ancestors lived in constant contact with the soil, their immune systems shaped by exposure to microbes in the environment. The hygiene hypothesis suggests that modern disconnection from the natural world, living in sterile environments, overusing antibiotics, avoiding dirt, has led to immune system dysregulation. Could geophagy, or at least the microbial and mineral exposure it provides, play a role in recalibrating immune health? Some researchers believe so, though more studies are needed. In the next part of our story, we'll delve into the global trade of clays and earth products, from small village markets to international commerce. How has the commodification of medicinal earth changed the practice of geophagy? What happens when ancient remedies become products in a global supply chain? We'll explore the ethical, economic, and cultural implications of turning sacred earth into commercial goods, and what that means for the future of traditional healing. So as you listen, think about the ways your own culture connects food, medicine, and ritual. Do you have family recipes meant not just to nourish, but to heal? Are there textures, tastes, or smells that bring comfort beyond nutrition? The story of why ancient people ate dirt is part of this larger human narrative. Tapestry of practices designed to keep us healthy, balanced, and connected to the world around us. As the practice of earth-eating transitioned from ancient healing rituals to modern habits, a new chapter unfolded, one shaped not by village traditions or spiritual ceremonies, but by global trade and the commodification of natural resources. The earth itself, once gathered quietly by hand from sacred hillsides, riverbanks, or local clay pits, is now bought and sold in a global marketplace. Packaged in sleek jars, capsules, or powdered pouches, clay has become an international product, moving from small communities to supermarket shelves, wellness shops, and online storefronts. But what happens when something as intimate and local as the earth becomes a commercial commodity? The story is as complex as the soil layers it involves. Imagine for a moment a small village in southern India, where for generations women have collected specific types of white clay used for stomach ailments and spiritual cleansing. They know the exact hillside to visit, the season when the clay is at its best, and the precise method to bake it in clay ovens, removing moisture and potential contaminants. This practice, passed down through oral tradition, maintains a delicate balance between use and conservation. But in the last 2 decades, traders from distant cities have arrived, offering to buy the clay in bulk. At first, the villagers are pleased with the income. The money helps pay for school supplies, medicine, and repairs to their homes. Yet over time, the traders demand more, digging deeper into the earth, removing clay faster than it can naturally regenerate. The hillside erodes. Streams turn cloudy with sediment. What was once a communal ritual becomes an extractive business. The same pattern is repeated across the globe. In West Africa, villages that once gathered small amounts of ailo, or calabash chalk for personal use, now see large trucks arriving to haul away tons of earth for export. In South America, indigenous communities find their clay deposits targeted by mining companies seeking materials for industrial use, not just for health products, but for ceramics, cosmetics, and construction. Even in North America, regions rich in bentonite or colonite clay are being stripped at industrial scales to meet the demand for detox powders, beauty treatments, and pharmaceutical ingredients. The commercialization of medicinal clay raises ethical questions about ownership, access, and cultural respect. Who has the right to sell the earth? Should companies be allowed to profit from ancient traditions without involving or compensating the communities that kept these practices alive? And what happens when the local people can no longer afford or access the very clay they once gathered freely? These questions mirror broader issues of biocultural exploitation, where indigenous knowledge and natural resources are commodified without consent. Anthropologists and human rights advocates warn that this trend risks erasing the cultural meanings behind earth-eating, reducing it to a marketable product, stripped of its history and context. When clay is sold in health food stores or online shops under labels like detox powder or cleansing earth, the rich traditions of geophagy are often absent from the packaging. The product becomes disconnected from its roots, transformed into a consumable trend rather than a sacred practice. The supply chain of clay is often opaque. Many consumers have no idea where the clay in their capsules or face masks comes from, who harvested it, or under what conditions. Some companies source clay ethically, working with local cooperatives that ensure fair wages, environmental protection, and cultural preservation. Others cut corners, purchasing clay from intermediaries who prioritize profit over sustainability. This creates a market where quality and safety vary widely. Some clays sold online are carefully processed, tested for heavy metals, and certified safe. Others are contaminated with lead, arsenic, or harmful bacteria, posing serious health risks to consumers unaware of the dangers. In some cases, people seeking healing may inadvertently harm themselves because of poor regulation and a lack of transparency. The global clay market is now worth billions of dollars, driven not only by geophagy, but by industries as diverse as cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, construction, and agriculture. Bentonite clay, for example, is used in drilling fluids for oil wells, in cat litter, and as a binding agent in animal feed. Kaolin is used in paper production, ceramics, and toothpaste. This industrial demand often competes with traditional uses, making it harder for small communities to access the specific clays they need for health and ritual. Some governments have begun regulating clay mining, but enforcement is inconsistent. In regions where corruption is rampant or environmental protections are weak, mining companies exploit resources without regard for local populations. Villagers, who once held stewardship over their land, find themselves pushed aside, their knowledge disregarded, their landscapes scarred. Yet amid these challenges, there are efforts to reclaim control over the earth. In parts of Ghana and Nigeria, women's cooperatives have formed to manage clay harvesting sustainably. They set limits on how much can be taken, monitor environmental impacts, and ensure that profits support local schools, healthcare, and infrastructure. These cooperatives often blend traditional knowledge with modern environmental science, creating models for ethical resource management. In South America, indigenous groups have partnered with NGOs to protect sacred clay sites from commercial exploitation, framing their work not only as environmental conservation, but as cultural preservation. Some have secured legal rights to their lands, establishing protected areas where clay harvesting follows ancestral guidelines. In the wellness industry, a few ethical brands are beginning to acknowledge the origins of their products, partnering with traditional communities, sharing profits, and educating consumers about the history of medicinal clay. They promote transparency. In sourcing, providing information about where the clay comes from, who harvested it, and how it was processed. This represents a shift toward more responsible commerce, though much work remains. The challenge is balancing tradition with demand, access with conservation, and profit with respect. As the popularity of clay-based health and beauty products grows, so does the risk of cultural erasure. To prevent this, companies, governments, and consumers must recognize that clay is not just a material, it's a piece of living heritage. It carries stories, rituals, and relationships that cannot be replicated in a factory or a marketing campaign. Some communities are finding innovative ways to protect their traditions while engaging with modern markets. In Kenya, for example, local entrepreneurs are creating educational programs that teach consumers about the cultural significance of geophagy, offering workshops that combine clay preparation with storytelling, music, and history. These experiences allow tourists and health seekers to understand the broader context of earth medicine, moving beyond simple consumption toward shared knowledge. In Haiti, artisans are integrating traditional clay recipes into cultural crafts, selling both edible clay products and artworks that celebrate the connection between earth, body, and spirit. This fusion of commerce and culture helps preserve practices that might otherwise disappear. The global conversation about geophagy is evolving. Health professionals are beginning to study not just the medical aspects of clay consumption, but the social, environmental, and ethical dimensions. Public health campaigns in some regions focus on safety, teaching people how to identify safe clays, avoid contaminants, and maintain traditional practices without risk. Others advocate for the inclusion of geophagy in broader discussions of food sovereignty and environmental justice. These efforts recognize that earth eating is more than a strange habit or a health fad. It's part of a complex human relationship with the planet. It reflects our need to heal, to connect, and to honor the ground that sustains us. In the next part of our story, we'll look at the future of geophagy in a world facing technological advances, environmental crises, and cultural shifts. Will the practice survive as a living tradition, or will it become fully absorbed into the machinery of global commerce? Can modern science, environmental ethics, and ancestral wisdom find a way to coexist? We'll explore emerging trends in research, medicine, and culture that may shape the next chapter of this ancient practice. So as you listen, think about the objects in your own life that once had sacred meaning, but now come packaged as products. How do you balance consumption with connection? The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just about clay, it's about how we treat the earth, how we treat each other, and how we decide what is valuable in a rapidly changing world. As we approach the final chapters of this story, the question shifts from history to possibility. What is the future of geophagy in a world defined by rapid technological change, environmental collapse, and cultural fragmentation? Will the practice of eating earth survive the pressures of modern life? Or will it dissolve into a relic of the past studied, perhaps, but no longer lived? The answer is not simple. It lies at the intersection of science, tradition, medicine, and the human longing for connection to the land. On one side, medical researchers and biotechnologists are diving deeper into the study of clay's properties, asking new questions about its potential uses in the modern world. Scientists at universities in Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas are conducting clinical trials to test specific clays for treating gastrointestinal diseases, heavy metal poisoning, and microbial infections. Some studies focus on nanoclay, particles, tiny fragments engineered at the molecular level to carry drugs into the body, deliver nutrients, or act as filters for toxins. These medical clays, purified and standardized in laboratories, represent a high-tech evolution of the ancient practice of geophagy, but they also risk detaching from the cultural roots that gave the practice its original meaning. As pharmaceutical companies patent new clay-based treatments, the concern grows: who owns this knowledge? Can we ethically separate the chemical properties of clay from the communities that first discovered and used them? On the other side of this debate, anthropologists and cultural historians argue for the preservation of traditional earth eating as a living practice, not just a source of pharmaceutical ingredients. They emphasize that geophagy is not merely about mineral supplementation or detoxification. It's about identity, spirituality, and ecological connection. Eating earth is tied to rituals of birth, pregnancy, healing, and grief. It's about grounding oneself in the literal sense, about tasting the land and remembering where life comes from. For many, the act of consuming clay is not just medicinal, it's ceremonial, symbolic, and deeply personal. The future may lie in a hybrid path, where science and tradition collaborate rather than collide. Imagine a world where communities partner with researchers to map and protect local clay deposits, ensuring that harvesting practices remain sustainable and respectful. Picture clinics where doctors and traditional healers work together, prescribing both modern treatments and ancestral remedies, acknowledging that both have value. In some parts of the world, this is already happening. In Ghana, for example, researchers collaborate with local women's cooperatives to study the mineral content of traditional clays, testing for safety while preserving the cultural practices surrounding their use. In South America, indigenous healers participate in medical conferences, teaching scientists about clay's role in traditional diets and medicines. These collaborations represent a new model for healthcare, one that values both data and experience, chemistry and ceremony. At the same time, climate change adds urgency to this conversation. As soils degrade and landscapes shift, the clays once used for healing may become harder to find. Rising sea levels, droughts, and pollution threaten the specific geological formations that produce medicinal earths. In some regions, communities are already adapting, seeking new sources of clay or developing synthetic alternatives. The challenge is to do this without erasing the cultural significance of the practice. Technology may offer solutions. Using geospatial mapping, satellite imagery, and machine learning, scientists can locate and monitor clay deposits worldwide, predicting which areas are sustainable for harvesting and which need protection. These tools could help balance conservation with access, ensuring that earth-eating remains a safe and viable tradition. 3D printing technologies are also entering the field. Some researchers are experimenting with creating edible clay structures, designed to release specific minerals or probiotics into the body. These innovations combine ancient wisdom with futuristic design, but they raise new questions. Does a 3D printed clay supplement still count as geophagy, or is it something entirely new? Will the sensory experience, the feel of the earth in the mouth, the taste of minerals be lost in the process? And if so, what happens to the emotional and spiritual aspects of the practice? The rise of biohacking and wellness culture adds another layer of complexity. In some circles, clay consumption is marketed as part of a high-performance lifestyle, alongside supplements, fasting protocols, and cutting-edge health gadgets. Influencers promote bentonite shakes and clay capsules as detox tools for urban stress, often without understanding the cultural histories behind these products. This commercialization risks reducing geophagy to a fad, stripping it of its roots, while turning it into a consumer trend. Yet at the same time, these trends introduce new audiences to the idea of earth as medicine, potentially creating bridges between modern wellness and ancient practice. The internet has also created global communities of clay eaters who share experiences, recipes, and support. Online forums connect people across continents, allowing someone in London to learn from a grandmother in Kenya, or a wellness enthusiast in Tokyo to chat with a healer in Peru. These digital spaces preserve knowledge that might otherwise be lost, but they also risk homogenizing the practice, erasing the local nuances that give it depth. The legal and ethical frameworks surrounding geophagy are evolving too. Some countries are developing guidelines for safe clay consumption, regulating the sale of earth products to prevent contamination while respecting cultural traditions. Public health organizations are beginning to include geophagy in their discussions of nutrition and medicine, acknowledging both the benefits and the risks. In some cases, doctors are being trained to ask about earth-eating habits without judgment, learning to incorporate this information into holistic care plans rather than dismissing it outright. The food industry is also watching. Edible earth products are entering the luxury market, with high-end restaurants offering dishes that include clay as an ingredient. Chefs experiment with clay infusions, clay-baked vegetables, and even edible ceramics designed to crumble and dissolve in the mouth. These culinary innovations celebrate the earth's flavors, but also provoke debates. Is this cultural appropriation, or is it homage? Does turning clay into haute cuisine honor the tradition or exploit it? As with so many aspects of globalization, the future of geophagy will depend on balance between innovation and respect, between commercialization and conservation, between science and spirit. The danger lies in forgetting that earth-eating is not just a curiosity or a commodity. It's a relationship built over millennia between humans and the land. It reflects our shared fragility, our dependence on the planet, and our search for healing in the simplest of substances. In the next part of our story, we'll take a step back to consider the philosophical implications of geophagy. What does it mean, at the deepest level, to eat the earth? How does this practice reflect our place in the natural world, our fears of death, our hopes for renewal? We'll explore how geophagy symbolizes more than just medical tradition. It represents a profound truth about human existence, that we are, and have always been, part of the soil. So as you listen, think about the future you imagine for yourself and for the planet. How do you see the relationship between tradition and progress, between technology and nature? The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just about history. It's about the choices we make now, in this moment, as we shape the next chapter of human life on Earth. Now, as we near the final chapters of this exploration, it's time to consider not just the science, the commerce, or the cultural habits of earth-eating, but the deeper philosophical questions that geophagy stirs in the human mind. What does it mean, in the grand scheme of existence, to eat the earth? What compels a human being fragile and temporary to reach down into the soil, gather a handful of dust or clay, and place it into their mouth? The answers are not merely biological or nutritional. They are metaphysical, rooted in the ancient. Awareness that life and death are cycles tied to the ground beneath us. In almost every religious or cultural tradition, there is a moment where the earth is invoked as a symbol of origin and end. We are born of the earth, nourished by it, and we return to it when life ends. To eat the earth in this sense is to participate in the cosmic cycle, not passively, but actively, acknowledging one's place in the order of things. It is to consume not just a substance, but a truth, that the line between body and soil is thin, perhaps even imaginary. In prehistoric burial rites, archaeologists have found evidence of grave goods that include clay and earth, sometimes placed in the mouths of the dead. Whether this was meant to feed the soul on its journey, or to symbolize a return to the land, is unknown, but the gesture speaks volumes. It represents an acceptance of mortality, a ritual closing of the loop between life and earth. In the act of eating soil while alive, humans engage in a kind of living funeral, a reminder of their origins and eventual dissolution. In this way, geophagy is not just a medical practice, it is a meditation on impermanence. Consider the writings of ancient philosophers like Heraclitus, who spoke of the constant flow of life, the endless transformation from one state to another. Dust becomes flesh, flesh becomes dust. The molecules that form your body today were once part of mountains, rivers, and ancient seas. The earth you might taste on your tongue contains remnants of stars, plants, and ancestors long forgotten. To eat clay is to accept this transformation, to internalize it not just intellectually, but physically. It's an act that collapses the boundaries between the self and the planet, between the eater and the eaten. The earth enters the body, becomes part of it, and then is released again, either through digestion or at the moment of death. This cycle reflects an ecological truth. Nothing is wasted, and everything is recycled in nature's grand design. In modern times, many people experience profound disconnection from nature. We live in cities of concrete, eat food processed from the soil and often forget the feel of dirt beneath our feet. The practice of geophagy, whether done for health, ritual, or craving, can be seen as a rebellion against this disconnection, a visceral reminder that the earth is not separate from us. It resides not just beneath our homes, but inside our bodies, in our bones, our blood, and the minerals that support our very existence. Even the human brain, with all its complexity, relies on elements found in soil: magnesium, iron, calcium, and neurons that fire thoughts, dreams, and memories are built from the earth's dust. In this sense, the mind itself is a construct of the planet, a temporary arrangement of particles borrowed from the land. Geophagy, then, is not just about survival, it's about humility. It is a physical acknowledgement that no matter how advanced our technologies become, no matter how far we travel into the stars, we remain creatures of the earth. Our bodies are on loan, made of clay and destined to return to it. In some philosophical systems, like Stoicism, this truth is a source of peace. The Stoics taught that understanding one's place in the universe brings freedom from fear. Why be anxious about status, wealth, or death when all life shares the same fate? Dust to dust, earth to earth. To eat clay is to accept this fate gracefully, to taste it before it tastes you. In Buddhist practice, there are meditations on decay, visualizations of the body returning to soil, of bones becoming dust, of life dissolving into nature. These meditations are not meant to depress, but to liberate, reminding practitioners of the impermanence of all things. Geophagy mirrors this awareness physically, a ritual consumption of earth that reflects the same philosophical acceptance of change and return. Some psychologists have speculated that geophagy may satisfy more than nutritional needs. It may also meet a psychological need for grounding, both literally and metaphorically. In moments of stress, grief, or uncertainty, eating earth can create a sensation of rootedness. The texture, the taste, the sensory act pulls the mind out of chaos and back into the body, into the present moment. It's a tactile way to reconnect with the physical world, especially in times when life feels untethered. This may explain why geophagy often appears during pregnancy, mourning, or famine, not just as a physical remedy, but as an existential comfort. There is also an element of resistance in earth eating. In societies where power and wealth are concentrated in the hands of a few, where systems of oppression sever people from their lands, the act of consuming the earth can be defiant. It says, "I will not forget where I come from. I will not abandon the earth, even if the world around me tries to replace it with plastic, concrete, and synthetic life." In some cultures, enslaved people ate clay not only to survive, but as a way to maintain a connection to their homelands, to remember the soil of their origins, even when taken far away. In this sense, geophagy becomes a form of cultural memory, a way to keep identity alive when all else is stripped away. Today, as we stand at the edge of environmental collapse, the symbolism of earth-eating feels even more relevant. Climate change, deforestation, pollution, these are symptoms of a species that has forgotten its relationship with the land. Ingesting earth, whether symbolically or literally, reminds us of our vulnerability. It calls us back to a time when humans lived within the rhythms of the planet rather than above them. It teaches humility, patience, and respect for the cycles that sustain life. In some modern eco-philosophies, such as deep ecology, the idea is that humans are not stewards of the earth, but participants in it, no more important than rivers, mountains, or worms. Geophagy can be viewed through this lens as an intimate participation in Earth's processes, a breaking down of the ego that separates human from nature. The act becomes a ritual of unity, not dominance. There is also a poetic beauty in the fact that despite all our progress, some of the oldest human practices endure. The same hands that swipe smartphones and tap on keyboards also reach for the fee. Ground, seeking clay to soothe the stomach or calm the mind. This coexistence of ancient and modern reflects the paradox of our species. We are technological, but still biological, evolving, yet rooted in the same elemental needs. Perhaps that is why the story of geophagy continues to fascinate. It is not just a medical mystery or a cultural curiosity. It is a mirror held up to humanity's relationship with the earth. It asks us to consider what it means to belong to a planet, to have a body made of minerals, to live briefly and return silently to the soil. In the next part of our story, we'll begin drawing all these threads together. We'll summarize the journey we've taken from ancient rituals to modern science, from sacred hillsides to online marketplaces, from survival habits to philosophical reflections. We'll ask, what does the enduring practice of earth-eating teach us about being human? And how can this knowledge guide us as we face the challenges of the future? So as you listen, let your mind settle like dust on still water. Think of the earth beneath you, the ground that holds the memories of all life that came before and all life yet to come. The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just about healing the body, it's about remembering who we are, where we come from, and where, inevitably, we will return as we enter the final segments of this long and winding exploration. Let's gather the threads of this story into a coherent reflection pulling from science, history, philosophy, and the raw human experience of living on this earth. From the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia to the powdered clays sold in modern wellness shops, the practice of earth-eating has never truly disappeared. It has only shifted forms, adapted to the times, woven itself quietly into the fabric of human survival. What began as a simple act placing earth into the mouth has unfolded across millennia as a practice layered with meaning. People ate earth to soothe the stomach, to cure poisoning, to ground their bodies during pregnancy or fasting. Others consumed clay as part of sacred rites, marking transitions between life and death, between the mundane and the divine. Some did it to remember their homeland after being torn away from it, while others simply followed instinct, their bodies craving minerals, textures, or the calming sensation of earth dissolving on the tongue. Through every layer of history, from the dusty streets of ancient Athens to the crowded markets of medieval Cairo, from the silent Andes to the plains of Africa, geophagy remained a constant in a changing world. It persisted because it worked, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, and often symbolically. The earliest written records from Sumer and Babylon mention earth-eating not as a curiosity, but as a medical recommendation. Egyptian papyri, Greco-Roman pharmacopoeias, Chinese herbal texts all describe the consumption of clays for health, purification, or ritual. In the Middle Ages, European physicians prescribed terra sigillata, stamped earth lozenges believed to ward off poison and disease. In the Americas, before European contact, indigenous tribes mixed clay with wild potatoes to neutralize toxins, a practice that is still followed today in some parts of the Andes. Meanwhile, in Africa, generations of women consumed baked clay during pregnancy to calm the body and the spirit, a tradition that crosses from tribe to tribe, from country to country. Across Asia, clays were included in ancient medicine cabinets alongside herbs and roots, forming part of a balanced approach to health. But as the modern world accelerated with industrialization, colonization, and the rise of pharmaceuticals, the image of earth-eating shifted in public perception. It became marginalized, treated as a remnant of the primitive past, pathologized as a disorder rather than understood as an adaptive practice. Medical professionals dismissed geophagy as a symptom of poverty, ignorance, or psychological illness. Colonial narratives often ridiculed it, misunderstanding both its function and its meaning. Yet the people closest to the earth kept the tradition alive, even when forced into secrecy. In the fields of the American South, in the mountains of Haiti, in the highlands of Peru, in the villages of Ghana, small pieces of clay continued to be baked, chewed, and swallowed, quiet acts of continuity that resisted cultural erasure. Modern science eventually circled back to the practice, asking new questions with better tools. Researchers found that certain clays could indeed bind toxins, neutralize stomach acids, protect the gut lining, and remove harmful bacteria. They discovered that geophagy often served a real measurable function in maintaining health, especially in regions where diets were nutrient deficient or where exposure to natural poisons was common. They studied the mineral compositions of different clays, cataloged their properties, and developed medical products based on ancient practices. Yet as clay became commercialized, packaged, branded, and sold online, it sometimes lost its connection to the people and places that had maintained the practice for centuries. The rise of detox trends, clay masks, and probiotic clay smoothies in modern wellness markets reflects both a rediscovery and a rebranding. These products are marketed as new solutions for modern problems, but they are, in truth, echoes of ancient habits. The difference is that they often come without the cultural understanding that gave them depth. The connection between eater and earth has, in some cases, been reduced to a transaction. This raises ethical questions. Who owns the knowledge of earth medicine? How do we honor the cultures that have preserved it? How do we prevent exploitation while embracing discovery? Some communities have taken control of this narrative, forming cooperatives to manage clay harvesting sustainably, teaching younger generations the safe and respectful ways to continue the practice, and partnering with researchers who value both tradition and science. They remind us that geophagy is not just about health, but about heritage. It's about the stories told while preparing the clay, the songs sung during harvest, the whispered instructions passed from mother to daughter, healer to apprentice. Beyond the scientific studies and commercial products, geophagy persists in everyday moments: pregnant women calming morning sickness, elders savoring the taste of home, migrants maintaining a connection to lost lands, spiritual leaders conducting rituals of grounding and humility. These are not strange anomalies. They are deeply human acts, rooted in the same instincts that led our ancestors to explore the world with their hands and mouths, to taste the earth and learn from it. The environmental dimension cannot be ignored either. In an age when the planet itself is under stress, when soils are eroding, climates are shifting, and biodiversity is collapsing, the practice of earth-eating becomes symbolic of a deeper relationship or disconnection with nature. Eating earth reminds us that we are part of the earth's cycles, not separate from them. It confronts us with the reality that all food, all medicine, and all life come from the ground. It humbles us, asking us to consider how we treat the soil that sustains us. If the earth becomes poisoned, polluted, or degraded beyond repair, the practice of geophagy will disappear, not because people lose interest, but because the source itself will be gone. And with it will vanish an ancient thread of human experience that has tied us to the planet since the beginning. In philosophical terms, geophagy can be viewed as an acceptance of life's fragility. It is a gesture that says, I know where I come from, and I know where I will return. To eat the earth is to close the circle, to participate in the cycle of life, decay, and rebirth. It is to acknowledge that the body is not a permanent structure, but a temporary arrangement of minerals, borrowed from the land and destined to go back to it. In that sense, geophagy is not just about survival, it is about meaning. It asks us to reflect on our place in the world, on our relationship with the environment, and on the continuity of life beyond individual existence. The simple act of putting a piece of clay in the mouth becomes, in this light, an act of remembrance and belonging. It connects us to ancestors who did the same, to ecosystems that formed the clay over millennia, and to a future that will depend on how we care for the earth now. As we prepare to close this story in the final chapters, let's reflect on the journey we've taken. We've walked through ancient temples and medieval marketplaces, through colonial struggles and modern laboratories. We've listened to the voices of healers, scientists, philosophers, and ordinary people who share a common habit, the consumption of earth. We've explored the medical, cultural, psychological, environmental, and spiritual layers of this practice. In the next and final parts of this series, we will bring all these themes together, offering a full circle conclusion that honors the complexity of this topic. We'll answer the lingering question: why did ancient people eat dirt, and why? In a world so different from theirs, do people still do it today? So as you listen, take one last deep breath, imagining the earth beneath you, not just as dirt, but as memory, medicine, and meaning. The ground holds more than roots and rocks. It holds the entire history of life. And sometimes, in moments of need, humans reach down, touch the soil, and taste it not just for the body, but for the soul. At last, we come to the final chapter of this long, peculiar, and strangely beautiful journey, a journey through mud, memory, medicine, and meaning. The story of why ancient people ate dirt is not just a curious footnote in human history. It is a window into the deepest parts of what it means to live on this planet as a fragile, thinking, feeling creature who knows, on some level, that they are part of the soil, not separate from it. We began this exploration in the caves and huts of our ancestors, where early humans, driven by instinct and observation, tasted the earth for survival, for healing, for reasons they could not always articulate, but somehow understood. They learned, by trial and error, that certain clays soothed the stomach, that particular soils could bind toxins, and that earth itself, when consumed mindfully, had a power beyond simple sustenance. These discoveries became traditions, rituals, and remedies passed from mother to daughter, from healer to apprentice, from tribe to tribe. We walked through the ancient medical scrolls of Mesopotamia and Egypt, where scribes recorded recipes that included clay, not as superstition, but as science, at least, the science of their time. We saw how Greek philosophers and Roman physicians prescribed earth for poisonings, stomach ailments, and spiritual protection. We followed the practice through medieval monasteries, where monks baked clay tablets during plagues, and into Islamic medicine, where earth from Mecca or Karbala became both sacred and therapeutic. We explored the Americas, where indigenous people mixed clay with wild roots to detoxify food, and Africa, where earth-eating during pregnancy remains a living tradition, intertwined with health, heritage, and comfort. We watched as European colonizers misunderstood these practices, branding them as savage or ignorant, failing to see the long chain of wisdom that lay beneath them. We examined the scientific renaissance of geophagy, where modern laboratories validated what ancient healers already knew, that clay can bind toxins, balance gut flora, and protect the body from environmental hazards. We learned about the gut microbiome, the delicate ecosystem within the human body that benefits from natural interactions with the earth, from minerals to microbes. We listened to the voices of modern practitioners, pregnant women in Ghana buying baked clay from market stalls, elders in the American South chewing pieces of white dirt as their mothers did before them, spiritual leaders incorporating earth into ceremonies, and urban consumers seeking detox clays online, often unaware of the rich history behind their purchases. We confronted the environmental consequences of mass clay harvesting, the commodification of natural resources, and the ethical dilemmas of turning sacred practices into products. We asked, who owns the earth? Who profits from its healing properties? And how do we balance modern demand with ancient respect? We stepped into the philosophical implications, to pondering mortality, humility, and the human relationship with the ground beneath our feet. In eating earth, we are reminded of the cycles of life and death, of the fact that our bodies are temporary gatherings of minerals, destined to return to the soil. The act of geophagy is not just about the stomach, it's about the soul. It's about grounding, literally and figuratively, in a world that often pulls us away from nature, away from memory, away from our own elemental roots. We saw how technology both helps and complicates this tradition, how satellites can map clay deposits while corporations risk exploiting them, how artificial intelligence can analyze soil safety while forgetting the cultural stories attached to the practice. We watched as clay became both a wellness trend and a survival strategy, straddling the line between ancient ritual and modern commerce. And now, at the end of this exploration, the question remains, why did ancient people eat dirt? Dirt? The answer is, of course, complex. They ate it because their bodies craved minerals, because it healed their stomachs, because it calmed their nausea, because it bound their poisons and buffered their guts. But they also ate it because it connected them to something larger than themselves, to the earth, to their ancestors, to the cycles of life and death, to the humility of knowing that no matter how high they built their temples or how far they sailed their ships, they were always made of clay. And why do people still do it today? Because the body remembers. Because the craving persists. Because, in a world of plastic and pixels, there is still something profound about tasting the earth itself. For some, it's a matter of culture, tradition, and ritual. For others, it's a quiet rebellion against disconnection, a way to feel. Something real in a time when so much is artificial. For many, it is comfort, a simple, tactile grounding when life becomes too much. Geophagy survives because the human story is not just about progress. It is about return, about circles, not lines, about remembering, not just inventing, about tasting the world in the most literal way possible, and knowing, if only for a moment, that you are part of it. As the dust of history settles on this narrative, we are left with a lesson that goes beyond clay and dirt. The earth feeds us, heals us, receives us when life is over. It is not a commodity, nor just a backdrop to human activity. It is part of us as we are part of it. The story of geophagy is the story of human beings learning, across time and space, how to live in harmony with that truth. In closing, take a moment to feel the ground beneath you, wherever you are right now. Whether you are in a city or a village, on a mountaintop or in a quiet room, remember that the earth is there silent, patient, waiting. It holds the bones of your ancestors, the memories of civilizations, and the minerals that form your body. To eat earth is to participate in that legacy, to taste not just soil but story. And that is why, from the dawn of humanity to this very day, people have reached down, gathered clay, and brought it to their lips, not just to survive, but to belong.